This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with James O'Brien.
Good morning. It's 3 minutes after 10. I hope you're well today. I hope the weather is agreeing with you. Don't forget to put a little cream on if you are heading out into the sunshine later. I suspect Gillian Keegan wishes she'd stayed at home yesterday. Never mind running the risk of sunburn. The politicians of the government returned to work after the summer hiatus, after the summer break, and within hours you had a former chief whip being found guilty of bullying another chief whip. And then you had a Secretary of State for Education, disgracing herself in a remarkable way, in a way that is quite rightly leading some of the coverage. But of course it is underpinned by the fact that they chose the weekend before the schools reopened to reveal that potentially hundreds of schools are in a perilous condition as a consequence of so-called RAC. Or aerated concrete. I think a quick nod to Ed early doors this morning for texting to ask whether the phrase falling apart like a cheap suit should be replaced by falling apart like a cheap school. And here's the problem, right, before we get stuck into Gillian Keegan. Here's the problem. And I think it might be quite a big problem. And I think it's possible I already owe you an apology for that slightly flippant talk-up that I did before the news. Technical term talk-up. This is my job. Right? And that means that I approach initially, until either you tell me off or I wise up to myself, I approach initially this story as a political conversation, right? And therefore it becomes all about optics and how it reaches the public. Like you, perhaps, I found myself thinking of Gordon Brown being recorded on tape describing a woman who I think was also called Gillian, for just for fans of mad trivia. Was it Gillian Duffy? He described her as a bigoted woman, which was a mistake. She expressed some bigoted and ill-informed views, but obviously it's not something he would have said if he'd known that he was still being recorded by, on that occasion, Sky News, I think. And that conversation was all about electability and alienating people who shared her bigoted views, of whom there are millions, as, of course, the referendum was to prove just 6 years later. And that is a mistake. I mean, I don't know if you've ever clocked this before, because this is my job. Therefore, I approach it in that way, and you normally join in. So I could sit here now and have a conversation about why I'm not as outraged, really, by this as some people are professing to be. I found 30p Lennox comments about refugees being told to F off back to France considerably more offensive, because that very deliberately and performatively demonstrated contempt for vulnerable human beings. I mean, those are the votes. He is in that role to harvest the votes of people who love the idea of refugees being treated really, really badly. That's a vote winner in some corners of the country, and those are the corners of the country that Rishi Sunak thinks 30p Lennox can reach. Gillian Keegan's clearly not in that category. She's perceived as one of the grown-ups. It's one of the most snobbish dichotomies that I've seen in British politics. The way that Sunak, the very, very privileged Westminster educated public school boy, hires someone with a northern accent to appeal to the racists. It's quite a remarkable sort of patronising move, really. 30p Lennox, of course, too thick to realise the role that he is being put into, but they wouldn't see Gillian Keegan as being someone like that. So when she is foul-mouthed, it's a much bigger problem, because she's supposed to be wooing middle-class votes. She's the big aspirational Liverpudlian who grew up in a Labour family and decided that the Tory party was the party for people like her. So she's not chasing the votes of ill-informed, poorly educated people like 30p Lee Anderson. She's supposed to be chasing the votes of the aspirational, the votes of the professional classes. And so when she swears in this way, it gets covered very differently by people who do this for a living. And that snobbery is innate, right? It took me a moment to clock it, because I was thinking what 30p Lennox said was considerably more offensive than anything that she has done. She's essentially just used it as a as an adverb, hasn't she? She's not using it to express contempt for vulnerable people. She's using it to express contempt for journalists who aren't. And this was the bit that I did get genuinely confused by. She's using it to express contempt for journalists who aren't congratulating her. I have to listen to it again in a minute. She said, why aren't you congratulating me for doing such a brilliant job? And you sit there thinking, we're all a little bit biased. I mean, some of our biases are built upon facts and evidence. Some of our biases are built upon bigotries and prejudices. But we've all got bits of bias in us. But I can't for the life of me see how she could have arrived at a place where she felt resentment at not getting a pat on the back for doing a bang-up job, having announced the day before schools open that many of them may be in serious risk of falling down. But that's really the thrust of what she was caught on tape saying. The reason why I mention that this is my job, therefore I'm conscious of sometimes coming at things from perhaps the wrong angle, although it's the angle that all of the media comes at it from. So it's another one of those mornings where perhaps slightly pompously, I sort of hope we might be swimming in a slightly different direction from the shoal, because I haven't got a child going to one of these schools today. If at 11 o'clock the news bulletin were to announce that a classroom in Kidderminster had been closed and 3 children taken to hospital as a consequence of a roof caving in, as a consequence of this aerated concrete being in place, then having a slightly knockabout conversation about whether or not she's as rude as some people suggest, I think would begin perhaps to look a bit rum. So really, the seriousness of having a Secretary of State for Education who is focusing upon her own sense of grievance and remarkable grandiosity at a time of serious crisis within our schools is actually a lot more serious than a little bit of effing and jeffing. But it's not perhaps as much fun to come at it from that angle. Let's have another listen to the clip. I'll probably play it 2 or 3 times, I'm warning you now. But we have, I believe, bleeped out all the relevant bits. I certainly hope so. I haven't checked.
We will get a plan, and every single one of them will be done.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just 2 moments for
Does anyone ever say, you know what, you've done a good job because everyone else has sat on their ass and done nothing? No signs of that, no?
We have to bleep out. Do we? Can we have a quick chat about that? Can we have a quick editorial meeting? Is that really, Keith? What do you think? Is that an unsuitable? Is it on the Ofcom list of words? One day I'm going to do a show about the words on the Ofcom list and where they stand on the gradations of offensiveness, and it will be the last show I ever do. I think that's a little bit delicate, isn't it? To bleep out. Well, let's have another listen now. I got distracted by the bleeps.
We will get a plan, and every single one of them will be done.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just 2 moments for
Does anyone ever say, you know what, you've done a good job because everyone else has sat on their ass and done nothing? No signs of that, no?
So, I mean, pardon? Sorry, what? Pardon? She's the Secretary of State for Education. Schools are closed because a problem that has been known about for the best part of a decade, I think, for more than a decade, has not been fixed. The Conservative Party came in 2010 and immediately closed down the scheme that would have seen every school in the country repaired by, guess when? Guess what year? Go on, have a wild guess. 2023. She is a member of the Conservative government. She's a member of the party that has been in power for 13 years. They've announced the closure of schools or the necessity of tests for schools the night before the schools are due to go back. Kids who have endured the privations of remote learning during COVID lockdowns are now being told they have to return to remote learning. And Gillian Keegan, unless I'm mishearing this completely, Gillian Keegan is cross that nobody is congratulating her. Just one more, seriously. That's what's happening here, right? I think everyone's focusing on the effing and the jeffing or on the, the morality of releasing clips and stuff like this. But surely the story here is the abject absurdity. How mad would you have to be to think on a day like today or a day like yesterday that you should be getting the plaudits And of course, the sly attack upon her colleagues past and present is pertinent as well, but not as pertinent as... So if you watch the footage, I don't know if you've watched the film, you watch the film, then you can see that I've done interviews like this, not for a while, I grant you. Maybe I'll start again when there's a Labour government, but the interview ends, and it's always a slightly awkward moment. It's especially awkward if you've just completely kebabbed someone, which hadn't happened there. Daniel Hewitt's a brilliant operator. It was a good interview, solid interview. It ends, and she's got this weird... I mean, how would you describe it? This sort of... I don't know, this sort of bubbling resentment comes to the surface. So her face changes slightly. So she's done her TV face. A TV face is like your mum's telephone voice, all right? So when your mum answers the phone and she goes, hello, and then when she turns to you and tells you that the tea's ready, she's got a completely different voice. Politicians have a TV face in that way, except some. Poor old Nadine. She often used to forget to put hers on. But this is it. So she's got the TV face, and it's like all cheery, smiley, and even difficult bits. Oh, yes, okay. Get to the end of the interview. TV face, boom, gone. Right? Real face, bang. And then she sort of has a go at the journalist for not saying well done. Could you imagine if Daniel Hewitt had concluded that interview by saying, well, Secretary of State, a lot of schools are closed, a lot of parents are worried, a lot of children are, of course, reduced to remote learning. A lot of people very confused about why you have left it so late to make this intervention, and of course very cross about the fact that your party elected to call time upon Labour's schools rebuilding programme. And of course, as we've learnt this morning, it was your current Prime Minister, the man who put you in this job, that when asked for funding to repair 300 to 400 schools every year, replied that, well, the 100 schools that we're currently funding is far too much, so I'm reducing the money to 50. I think it is only fair in these circumstances, Secretary of State, to say to you, jolly well done. Seriously, congratulations, Gillian Keegan, on a job well done. You're really, and I'll tell you what as well, you're a lot better than all those other Tories who've been sitting on their backsides for so long. How? I don't know if I can get a phone in out of this question, but what the hell is going on in what passes for her head? Imagine if the journalist had done it. Even some of the most, we have to concede, don't we, that over the last 13 years we've heard some astonishing exercises in sycophancy from client journalists, particularly in broadcast, particularly on the radio and these weird new TV stations, to Tory politicians queuing up to come into television and radio studios to have their little tummies tickled by the softest, most friendly of questioning in the history of the world. But even they, and you can now think of whatever sycophant or client journalist you please and insert them into the space available, even they yesterday would not have turned to a Secretary of State presiding over utter chaos and decide that this was the moment to congratulate her on a job well done. Yeah, let's do that. How I don't know much about Gillian Keegan. I probably already know more than I want to. But how could anybody? I mean, it's not even... Has she got a touch of the Nadines? God forbid we thought we'd got rid of her. It's like Nosferatu. I mean, what the hell happened at the end of that interview? Is there a case for arguing that actually she's got a point? She has done a really good job. Or is she just seeing herself as entirely detached from the last 13 years and the rest of the cabinet? It's literally Rishi Sunak who refused to provide the funding needed to start fixing these problems on anything like a scale that would see them fixed before, I don't know, the year 3000. To quote Busted briefly. I don't know. So look, I'll throw open the phone lines on that one. How could Gillian Keegan end up in a psychological space where she thought that after the chaos of the last weekend regarding rack concrete in schools, journalists should be congratulating her on doing a good job? I just want to know what you think. 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. Talk me through the process by which she could sit there and think, I'll tell you who's really the victim here. Forget about the kids doing the remote learning. Forget about the parents worrying that the classroom ceiling might come down on little Johnny's head. Forget about all those civil servants who've been begging for the money to fix this for years and being told to clear off by Rishi Sunak. I'll tell you who the real victim here is, lads. Gillian Keegan. She's the real victim here, and it's about time you bloody journalists started giving me the credit I deserve for doing a brilliant job of not fixing any of these problems and announcing the day before they all go back to school that we might have to close more or remote educate children. I'm absolutely... But sometimes... Come here a minute. Sometimes I start talking at 10 o'clock in the morning. You might have noticed this, and I'm expecting to go off in one direction entirely. I'm familiar with the story, just as you are. Today it's the clip, the clandestine clip, the unexpected clip of Gillian Keegan being broadcast by ITV. And I thought perhaps we'll have a moral discussion about whether or not it is reprehensible conduct for them to reveal something that was filmed in circumstances that she never expected to be broadcast. Pompous, professional broadcaster mode. The actual visceral reaction to this has just happened live on your radio. You have a Secretary of State for Education presiding over epic mismanagement and chaos, claiming that she should be congratulated. She is in danger of making Nadine Dorries look normal. 0345 6060 973. We'll probably move on at some point to the broader issues here. But just to start with, just the state of British politics. And remember, everything that happens now is happening too late to get into my book, How They Broke Britain, out on November the 2nd. There's a tug. There's a tug upon my strings every time something happens that would have walked straight into the book if it had happened a month ago. You're writing a book called How They Broke Britain. Schools are literally crumbling before our eyes as a consequence of austerity and ideology. And I can't get it in the book. But I have spent a lot of time examining the mindset, the psychology of these people. And usually I'm not as baffled as I am today. How could she end up believing, after a round of interviews about chaos in her department, that she deserves congratulations? Go on, 0345 6060 973. And if you can get this one definitive, I'll give you the money myself.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
All right, we will take some calls eventually, but I'm in one of those moods this morning. So I just spent 10 minutes before we came on air. So have you seen the Tories thing today? They've now put out this as a sort of meme. I'm holding up my phone because we record it all for YouTube these days. I've no idea whether you'll be able to see it or anything like that. I've probably just given you my home number. So the Tories have put out. Is that a meme? That's not a meme, is it? What is that? It's like a banner. It's like a poster. They put out a caption, so it just says "Most schools unaffected." And I spent 10 minutes before we came on air asking colleagues to come up with what? That's mad, right? You don't boast about the fact that there's only a slim chance of getting your face eaten by a leopard, but when someone has just had their face eaten by a leopard. So I desperately tried to come up with answers to what could we do? What could I tweet now as a joke, as a quote tweet above that? Most schools unaffected, most something aren't murderers, most doctors aren't murderers after that. Oh, that would have been quite good, actually. But I couldn't come up with anything. The best I could come up with was most people at the beach are not eaten by a shark, right? Keith came up with most ducks quack. Did you? What was it? Was that what you came up, most ducks quack? No, I know you weren't really listening to me, to be fair, but you answered, so, it's in the public domain now. Another colleague upstairs came up with most planes don't crash, which I thought was quite good. But guess what Labour have gone with? They've actually literally gone with most beachgoers not eaten by big shark. It doesn't work. That's why I didn't tweet it, lads. It's not that funny. Is it? I don't think it is. It's funnier than most ducks quack, but still, it's not. Well, actually, no, that's got a bit of a Harry Hill surreal air to it now. But I digress. Gillian Keegan. How could anybody preside over the chaos caused by rack in schools and complain to a journalist that no one was congratulating her on the job that she's done? David's in Dundee with one of the most difficult questions, David, that I think I've ever asked.
Look, thank you very much, first of all, for having me on. I've listened to you for a long time, so
welcome.
So if I get a bit nervous and tongue-tied, please bear with me.
It's only me. Go on.
First of all, I want to preface everything by saying that I'm not a Tory voter in any way at all.
Okay.
Having said that, I don't think the swearing side of what Gillian Keegan's done is actually all that bad. Compared to the disgusting things that Therapy Lee says, it's not.
No, I completely agree with you. I think I agree with you. It's not the bit that we're focusing on. The bit we're focusing on.
Not at all.
How the hell did she end up thinking that journalists should be queuing up to congratulate her on a job well done?
I honestly think it's down to 13 years worth of the Tories drinking their own Kool-Aid.
Yeah.
I think it's down to this whole partisan politics where you sit on one side of the chamber and you have to shout at everything the other side says. Whether or not it's a good idea, you just disagree with everything that's said automatically.
Yeah.
And it's down to them saying, ignoring the fact that they cut the budget, because somehow that will have been Labour's fault.
Yeah.
And she may well have been working hard on this, but you don't ask a teacher to say, what was your school built of when we built it 40 years ago? You go to the local authority, you go to your local records, you go to whatever it was down.
They knew. That's the point. They knew that this was going on, which was why Labour had their Rebuilding Schools programme in place.
So you don't go to the teachers and say, well, we haven't heard back from the schools. We haven't had the surveys back. They've had 7 weeks where the schools were shut. They had a year during COVID when no one was in school. These things could easily have been fixed if they had the will to, if they had the want to, and they've been caught out. They've been caught out now because it's come to people's attention, and I think if it had stayed under the radar, it would never have been mentioned.
Do we know why? I mean, this was actually yesterday's phone-in, but it still hasn't been answered. Do we know why it happened so late in the day? Do we know why this emerged at the end of the summer holidays, as opposed to at the beginning or last summer?
Well, am I not right in saying that they were expecting it before the summer? They were expecting a list of schools before the summer holidays, were they not? And
yes.
the list was never published and never...
So someone just came back from holiday. Do you think someone came back from holiday last week and said, can you give me the list of all the schools that are being fixed? And someone said, I think I left it by the photocopy.
Well, there's another thing as well. The politicians have been on the summer recess, so nobody thought, this is actually really important, but we're going away on holiday for a little while, so let's just put it on the back burner.
And then suddenly it's the day before school, and it's a bit like forgetting your homework. So the opening bars of Songs of Praise comes on the telly, and you go, oh my days, I'm back at school tomorrow and I haven't done my maths.
Yeah, it's honest. It genuinely pickles my noodle. It really does.
Pickles my noodle too now. I've not heard that phrase before.
The fact that she can go on an interview and actually feel justified in saying, do you not feel like you want to give us a pat on the back once in a while?
I know. That is the bit where I think every time you think you've seen it all, and then up pops another one. Who pops at you, giving you another masterclass in entitlement and self-pity and all the rest of it. David, a sparkling debut. I've had this thing bubbling in the back of my mind all morning, and I've finally worked out what it is. Is it from the day-to-day when Steve Coogan is playing a night watchman or a security guard at a pool, and there's been a death? And he's asked about his feelings on it. And he says, well, I would say this. I've been working here for 18 years. In 1975, no one died. In 1976, no one died. In 1977, no one died. In 1978, no one died. In 1979, no one died. In 1980, someone died. In 1981, no one died. In 1982, there was the incident with the pigeon. It's genius because it is this almost surreal attempt to minimise seriousness. And the Tories have gone full day to day. I often wonder, I must ask him next time our paths cross, what Armando... In fact, I think I did ask him last time I interviewed him. What do you do when the politics is even more surreal than what your imagination has come up with? I'm talking Armando Iannucci, who wrote The Thick of It, and Veep, and lots of other wonderful things. And of course, big part of the day to day. How do you deal with someone like Gillian Keegan sitting there at the end of an interview and saying, I should have had some congratulations for this, Jeff. A lot of you telling me that the word that begins with A to describe a posterior is routinely used on other radio programmes. Chris Moyles, for example, and even the BBC have played it out without that word being bleeped. I just work with a very Victorian crew. It's coming up to 10:30. More calls, I promise, in the next half hour of the programme, and less of me. I hope, well, I don't know. I presume that is likely to tempt you to stay tuned as opposed to the opposite, but we'll soon find out. Meanwhile, Holly Harris has your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
10:33 is the time. Of course, it's not just schools. Hospitals could be plagued by similar problems. And one of the venues where I'm taking my book tour in November has also closed temporarily after they found RAA concrete there. That's the Royal and Derngate in Northampton, where I'm sure you'll join me in hoping they get that sorted as soon as possible. I've sold out there, I think. 10:33 is the time. Eddie's in Stevenage. What? Talk to me, Eddie, about this notion of believing, genuinely believing. And if you watch the footage, it's even more affecting than just listening to it. She almost looks down the barrel of the camera and demands to know why no one's saying well done to her. How did we end up? How did she end up in such a space?
The issue which we've got is some of our MPs have got sheer and utter contempt for the public. They're not interested in their jobs. They don't care about the people who they're supposed to be helping, and it's all career politicians, so it's all me, me, me. So you've got this big glaring problem in front of you, and you're more interested in give me some credit for what I've done.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how big the problem is, whether the problem's solved or not, but you should give me some credit for me at least trying, me at least helping. And it's indicative society at the minute. Our politicians should be role models for our kids. And politicians always like to say about footballers being failed role models and all this.
That's true.
But politicians are the people who run the country and set the moral fibre and the laws and everything in the country.
I have to for younger listeners, perhaps under the age of, I don't know, 20 or so, then what Eddie describes did used to be the case in some ways. It's not some mythical fantasy island that he's describing, that there was a time where you could expect a modicum of moral leadership, or at least an acceptance of consequences in the aftermath of actions from governing politicians. But I grant you that if you haven't been paying attention since 2010, you'd probably think that was nonsense. He's right. It did used to be a bit like that. Carry on, Eddie.
As adults, and which we teach our kids, is we need to be accountable for our actions. Everything we do has a repercussion. When you get into politics, I believe you should get into politics because you want to make the country a better place, not make it worse. And the problem which we've got now with multiple different scandals, and this is the next one in the line. We've got Grenfell, we've got the COVID inquiry, we've got the Windrush inquiry as well. How long does it take for things to be done? There's always excuses.
Yeah, you're right. I don't want to get too unfocused from the. But you're right to mention other examples of it. Thankfully, and hopefully, this won't be anything like as lethal as the other examples you cite, or as harrowing as the other examples that you cite. But I'm interested in something you said at the beginning, and it oddly reminded me of Liz Truss, which I'm not sure I'd thank you for. But it's as if it's a video game, and they're accruing credits to get to the next level. This is it. Yeah, and you saw it with Liz Truss. She spent her whole time as in international trade in the Foreign Office accruing bogus credits, claiming that this trade deal was brilliant and that this trade deal was amazing and that this rollover was not a rollover at all, but actually a wonderful, brave new sunlit upland. And the Tory membership swallowed it, and that's how she ended up leader of the Conservative Party and, very briefly, Prime Minister. Big anniversary today, Eddie. Do you remember what the anniversary is today?
Is this the latest one?
1 year to the day since Liz Truss became Prime Minister. 1 year to the day. And so you look now at this generation of Tories, and she's thinking, I need credits in this job. I need to get credits. I need to accrue credits to move up to the next bonus level. And no one's giving me any credits, despite the fact I've actually turned up to work. And that perhaps begins to explain where she was coming from at the end of that interview yesterday.
It also actually explains Nadine Dorries and why she was so.
I think that's a whole new level.
When she was upset about not getting into the House of Lords, and it seems like every politician which comes in,
greed.
It's not, which is greed, but they're not looking at that job. It's a stepping stone, and it shouldn't be a stepping stone. It's like they get into
everything is a means to an end. Everything is a means to an end. Nothing is an end in it. So just do the flipping job like everyone else in the country has to every day.
This is the problem, and this is the problem, and the repercussions of this. And their failed policies, whatever they do, means that the poorest, the working class suffer, crime goes up, people's attitude changes, and the thing is as well, which I do not get, is language. Why can't people criticise people when swearing, no MP should ever be caught swearing on air.
I don't know about that. I like your moral compass, and I wish more people had it. But I think certainly I swear like a trooper off air, and I do it when the microphone's turned off, and I shouldn't. It's breaking one of the key rules of broadcasting. You should never swear in the presence of a microphone in case the microphone is accidentally on. Luckily, Keith is such a consummate professional that I never find myself in a situation where that happens. But I do take your point, and I think the camera being off gives us some defence on that front, much less so than 30p Leenock, who of course used that F word when talking about refugees to deliberately appeal to people who really love the idea of refugees suffering. The kind of people who say we should turn guns on them in the channel or whatever it may be. Lee, Eddie, thank you, mate. 10:39 is the time. This is really good from Mark in Streatham. And again, psychologically, you can, I don't know what the academics say, but you can never fully inhabit someone else's mind. If you look, empathy is a great example. You've got empathy, and it's flawed, and it's sometimes perhaps even insincere. But you see someone suffering, and you feel bad inside, whether briefly or permanently, whether it haunts you all day, whether you remember the homeless person you saw at the tube station at 8 o'clock this morning when you're going home at 8 o'clock at night, and you wonder where they are, or you don't feel anything at all. And those of us who feel something can never quite imagine what it's like to feel nothing. I think imposter syndrome must be like that. Mark in Streatham writes, I was told by a civil servant that a minister they worked for has a total lack of imposter syndrome. It never crosses their mind. That's Dorries, actually. Never crosses their mind that they're not entitled to be where they are. Often because they're too stupid. They're too stupid to realise how stupid they are. That's an amazing superpower for a politician. You're kind of plagued by even the vaguest level of intelligence. You're going to have moments of self-doubt. But if you're too stupid to realise how stupid you are, then whether you're very posh like Jacob Rees-Mogg or whether you're not like 30p Leenock, you can go anywhere. You've got this turbocharged self-belief because you're too stupid to realise how stupid you are. Mark continues, let us assume, lettuce there spelt in a way that suggests the minister of whom he speaks may have been Liz Truss, let us assume that the minister later progressed to the top job, even for the briefest of tenures. This type of personality is now typified by Gillian Keegan. They truly believe that they're doing an amazing job all the time, and they truly expect plaudits, which is why they spit the dummy when they don't get a round of applause. It's not mystery hour, mate. Tracy's in Sidcup. Tracy, what would you like to say?
Yeah, hi, James.
Hello, Tracy.
I think it's just interesting that that she has this point of view, and the only way I can get my head around it is if they truly believe that they are being the hero here.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is that they don't think that this is their responsibility at all, because she states that. She says that it's the responsible body's responsibility, i.e. the schools.
Yes.
So therefore, it's almost like they're coming in and taking on the responsibility of a situation that isn't theirs in the first place. Like if you were walking down the street and you saw somebody fall over with a bag of shopping and you ran over and helped them to pick up the shopping and everything, it's not your responsibility to do that. However,
but I'm the Secretary of State for helping people who've just dropped their shopping, though.
Yeah, absolutely. But we don't want to focus on that. We want to focus on the fact that actually it's not my responsibility, but I am going to help you. I am going to swoop in. I am going to be seen as a hero. And what do you do to heroes? You praise them. So therefore, her expectation is that she does deserve praise because they're taking on something that isn't their responsibility. But don't worry, this is what your government's going to do for you. We've seen the problem and we're going to swoop in and save the situation anyway. Because if you take away the fact that they have the responsibility to sort this out, then actually what they're doing is by doing anything at all, no matter how small or large, they are coming in to save the day. And if you see yourself as a hero, then you would expect to be praised as a hero.
What about the bit, if we were to really reach for a more charitable analysis, the bit where she talks about everyone else sitting on their backsides for years. She has come in and has, I suppose, pressed the alarm button in a way. It's as if, I don't know, she's been driving a knackered old car around for her since she got the job, but she's finally called the AA. And why aren't people congratulating her for calling the AA? I've nicked that off a texter, but I haven't got their name in front of me. There's something in that, isn't there, maybe?
Yeah, I think there is. And also, I don't think it's been downplayed, because she then goes on to say, well, feelings can collapse from anything. So it's almost, it's not such a big deal, and it can be easily sorted out. And don't worry, everyone's been sitting around doing nothing, but I'll come in, save the day, sort it out, because it's really easy to sort out. Don't worry, Gillian's here. Wear my pants on on the outside, and where's my quote? It's incredulous. I mean, my son's school is one of the schools that's been affected by this.
When did you find out? When did you find out?
We found it out on Thursday.
This is the bit I don't get. I mean, even if you're going to give her a biscuit for actually pressing the alarm button, why did they press it on Thursday?
I know. But I think they just didn't really expect it. I mean, the way that she downplayed it, yes, the ceiling can collapse from anything, but that's an insane thing to say at this point.
Most ceilings will not collapse.
I've lived in many different buildings, worked in many buildings, and I've never known a situation where, for no apparent reason, as we're concerned, the ceiling just falls down. It just doesn't happen. So it's, to sort of downplay it like that, I just thought was really offensive.
Yeah, well, that's what I was trying to convey at the top of the show before I got completely distracted by my utter bafflement at her demanding praise and congratulations for doing what she's done. How it feels to be in the eye of this particular storm, like you are. And you're right. It is scant comfort that most ceilings will not collapse. Most schools are unaffected. That's what they're reduced really to boasting about. Thank you, Tracy. I think I disagree with Jonathan in Deal, but I'm not sure. Let's give it the infernal ratio, 52%, 48. He says, I think she knew exactly what she was doing. She's attempted a bit of Jonathan pie, but she's made a dog's dinner of it. No, you've got to see her face, Jonathan. I think you've only heard the audio. It's the TV face disappearing in a heartbeat, and then the completely different tone. So she first of all is speaking to someone off camera. She's not speaking to the journalist that's interviewed her, Daniel. She's speaking to somebody over there, probably one of her own aides. She's sort of looking for support, because an aide is never going to turn around and say, I'm terribly sorry, Secretary of State, you're being a complete prat. Please sit down and be quiet. They'd be fired on the spot. So you turn to someone who's paid to agree with you and to sort of tickle your toes every morning and go, well, this is awful, isn't it? I'm not getting any praise. I'm not getting any congratulations. And then bolstered by that, by the sort of the shrug. I imagine I'm constructing an entire off-camera scenario now. But so the aide goes, yeah, they're awful, aren't they? Or at least implies that through his or her body language. And then emboldened by the sycophantic support of her spad, she turns back to the journalist and goes, hey, why aren't I getting any? What I'll do now is I'll play you the clip and I will highlight the point at which her TV face disappears. And then she goes to the aide and then she comes back to the journalist.
We will get a plan, and every single one of them will be done.
Okay, thank you very much.
TV face gone. Turns to aide.
Just 2 moments for
Does anyone ever say, you know what, you've done a good job because everyone else has sat on their
turns back to
and
journalist.
done nothing? No signs of that, no?
There we go. That's what happened there. You can pay me later.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 10 minutes to 11 and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where the, I suppose, curious case of Gillian Keegan has moved into the psychology rather than the profanity. I don't know. Some examples of journalists using footage recorded without the subject realising seem to me completely defensible. When 30p Lenart was on the doorstep with Michael Crick and sort of wandered away from the journalists that were accompanying him to ask a friend to pretend not to be his friend, so that when he knocked on the door, he would masquerade as a genuine supporter of his politics or his policies. That seemed to me to be fair, because no one had ever given him any impression whatsoever that he wasn't being recorded. He was just too dopey to realise. Gordon Brown, I think, let down by his aides, actually. There should have been someone there saying, take the microphone off, but I don't see how Sky News could not have broadcast that footage. I don't know. I sort of think, what would you do in the same circumstances? And I genuinely don't know. But you'd have to be, you'd have to be getting up early in the morning to make a decision not to share it, not to broadcast it. And then, of course, you've got an interesting element of this, which is the decision taken by ITV would in some way, whether consciously or subconsciously, and I think we underestimate the subconscious sometimes as journalists. Subconsciously, there's a decision there not to worry about future access. And that's of a piece with a changing mood across the board at the moment. Lewis Goodall picked up on it yesterday when he was talking us through the Labour reshuffle and the coverage, even in unhelpful papers, in traditionally opposition or traditionally unhelpful newspapers. The coverage of Keir Starmer's Labour Party now is looking increasingly like the coverage of a government in waiting. And that might have informed the opinion as well. If this was 3 years ago when Johnson's government had just come within an 80-seat majority and everyone was expecting them to stay there for the foreseeable future, you might think twice about upsetting a senior cabinet minister on such an epic scale with stuff that is morally or professionally questionable. But no, not at the moment. The sense of the plug hole being circled is very hard to avoid. And yet, of course, we're not due to go down the plug hole until quite possibly December 2024. Back to Gillian Keegan and how she could have ended up in a place thinking that journalists should have been congratulating her on handling this crisis. Jenny's in Yeovil. Jenny, what would you like to say?
You've made me laugh this morning.
Oh, I am
your
glad.
intro was brilliant.
Thank you. Thank you. There's a little bit of happiness. Goes a long way at the moment, doesn't it?
Well, oh God, we need it. I think Gillian and a lot of other MPs, especially Tory party MPs, are in their own little bubble. They obviously have no idea what effect their decisions are making on people. You know, there's a lot of stress about this. I'm not a mum myself, but, you know, I can understand, you know, if you're sending your kid back to school this week, you must be, oh, my God, what's going to go on, you know? So I think you and your viewers are correct that, you know, she might be, one of your viewers said that she's, you know, some of them are stupid.
Yes.
Maybe that's right. Perhaps she's got too many yes men round her saying,
all of that.
You're brilliant, you're brilliant.
All of the above. And also, I mean, who do you gauge yourself? This is where I come close, dangerously close, Jenny, to having some sympathy for the current cabinet. Because how do they compare themselves? What's their gauge for competence and integrity? Because you look around, I don't know when Gillian Keegan got into the cabinet, but I think it was relatively recently. And so she looks around at what has flourished and thrived in recent years. Where on earth is she going to get an example from on a competent politician possessed of integrity and professionalism? Where would she see? Who would her example be?
They're all singing from the same hymn book. They're all saying the same thing. Denial, 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 distraction. It's their fault. It's not my fault. It's their fault. And I think she probably has built some of them up, especially her, by the sounds of it, into, she probably came in the office on Monday and someone said, you've got to do this. And she goes, okay, that's a bit sort of radical. We're going to have to close schools, are we? Oh, yeah. Okay. She probably got told to do that. It's not her decision. And the shocking thing, what we should be talking about, I mean, you know, this is shocking enough. But the amount, like yesterday on Sky News,
That's all right.
She denied knowing about the government spending 32 million on her own offices. And she didn't know anything about it.
I think that's possible. It's not. It's a bit. I mean, it's a bit like me here. I don't know how much they spend on refurbishing studios, and it's got nothing to do with me whether they do or not. And if I was conducting a phone-in on the cost of living crisis, and someone rang in and said they've just spent £5 million on your studios, you don't know. I don't think it would be fair to pick me up for that, would it?
Well, I think so. I mean, she even said, I did wonder why we had nice furniture or something like that. She did notice something.
It's a question of what she signs off on.
That is her job.
Yes,
you
think
know,
so.
I mean, it's not your job to know.
Yeah, but don't forget that Boris Johnson, this takes me back to wondering where you get your example from, because Boris Johnson sat in a flat, watched it be redecorated with 850 quid rolls of wallpaper without knowing where the money had come from. Don't forget that, Jenny, supposedly.
Well, he did know, because he asked
How dare you? How dare you suggest that he did know? He lost his phone and was unable to retrieve the messages that would have revealed to him who did pay for his flat to be refurbished.
But this is what... We're laughing at this. But
Yes.
This is... is this the best we got?
Is this really the best we can do?
Is this the best we can do? We're in a crisis with schools, and we're laughing at her when we should have someone serious who goes, you know what, we made mistakes in the past. We're going to sort this out now. Instead of denying it all and blaming it on other people, say, right, okay, we are going to sort this out. And she did say we're going to sort it out in a fashion, but, do I believe her? No, I don't take her seriously anymore.
You can't take her seriously anymore because she's asked for a biscuit after presiding over what we've seen over the last few days. And actually, you highlight a really important point about responsibility and where the buck stops. It doesn't stop anywhere now. The buck it has to stop somewhere. I think it was Peter Carrington who resigned as Foreign Secretary when the Argentinians invaded the Falkland Islands, and he couldn't have known about that in advance, and it would be hard to make a very powerful case for saying that it was his fault, but he should have done, is the kind of historical conclusion, and therefore he resigned. Think of that Estelle Morris, who resigned from the Labour cabinet because she didn't think she was up to the job of being Education Secretary. I mean, would you swap her out now for Gillian Keegan, someone with the conscience or the consciousness to acknowledge their frailties and flaws, as opposed to someone who thinks that she's played a blinder and is demanding a medal, a winner's medal, as a consequence, while children are literally being remote taught again because they can't sit in their classrooms? Thank you, Jenny. Mike's in Crewe. Mike, a bit short of time, but make it count.
Okay, well, firstly, I think Gillian was lucky that she swore because that meant that the debate about whether we should talk about that or talk about whether we're leaked was, distracted from the absolute absurdity of what she was actually saying.
Yes.
And, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I'm now longing for the days when, the people who were on the opposite party to my own were people like Hasseltine, who's at least competent.
Yes.
And what's happened, and it's a fundamental change that we've seen over the last 10, 15 years. The minister's job used to be to get things done, make the right calls, fix the issue, or improve their department. That's what a minister used to do. Now, the job of the minister is no longer to actually get things done. You've just got to be able to sound like you do on the media or in the Commons. You don't have to address the actual issue. What she needed to do, job, was to trumpet the survey.
Our job is it's not about results. It's about how what we're doing is reported.
That's right. How is it perceived?
Which is why they hire so many journalists to work in Downing Street and their departments. It didn't used to be like that, Even Alistair Campbell wasn't going to do the bidding of the owner of the Today newspaper when he moved into Downing Street, because the owner of the Today newspaper was Rupert Murdoch. Bernard Ingham was a career civil servant, but now it's like a revolving door. James Slack was political editor of the Mail, went to work at Downing Street, worked for May, worked for Johnson's, came out. He's now deputy editor of The Sun. It was his leaving party that led to many of the fines that were issued during lockdown for lockdown breaches. It is, you're right, it is. It's how will this be reported? It's not have I fixed it. It's am I going to get a good press on this? And she's thinking that's why she's directed her anger at a journalist. You should be giving me a good press. You should be giving me credit so that I can move up to a bonus level.
She was pleased with herself being able to say that it's only 1.5% or whatever. And it doesn't matter which department. If it's Braverman, it doesn't matter how much it costs she's fronting a campaign that costs £4 billion because what we've got to do is distract from the complete failure of this asylum system by talking about
so they don't sit down.
What they're going to do instead.
Yeah, we're going to do this and do that and deport them and do this.
Anything.
So they don't sit down at the end of the day and say, how many schools have we fixed today? They sit down at the end of the day and say, what did the Mail say?
And same with Sunak. He's saying there's a million things wrong with Sunak, there's a million things wrong with our country, but what he's done is he's tried to make it so that it's only these 5 places.
And half of them have got nothing to do with him anyway. Inflation will come down because of gravity, and the waiting lists are going up. Thank you, Mike. I like that. Cummings picked up. You said the weirdest chapter in the new book is the one about Dominic Cummings. There were moments when I was writing it that I almost found myself liking him. Almost. And one of the things he picked up on a lot was that Johnson did not care about results. All he cared about was what the Telegraph and the Mail were saying, which, given that they were so sycophantic, you could have predicted a week before what they would say about almost anything he did. that was really, really dangerous. And that has infected people like Gillian Keegan, I suppose, in that you're saying, I don't really care about how many schools we fixed today. I need to know what the Mail is saying. Well, it's bad news for you, Gillian, I'm afraid, because even the Mail has managed to go for the jugular today. Minister's TV blunder that says it all about Tory chaos. Better late than never, lads. Better late than never.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
5 minutes after 11. And of course, even when they do resign, they don't. I was just thinking about Jenny's call and other calls in the last hour about the consequences of actions. Even when they do resign, and Doris didn't resign in disgrace. Well, she kind of resigned in disgrace, but that's not why she resigned. Then yesterday you had that Chris Pincher appealing against his suspension from the House of Commons. Owen Paterson, of course, is the patron saint of trying to wriggle off a hook that has been created by your own egregious behaviour. And they were queuing up to try to help him. Rees-Mogg led some bunch of Daily Telegraph journalists. Boris Johnson was part of the Save Owen Paterson campaign. So when they do something wrong, their initial thought, their only thought is, must get myself off the hook. And when they do something not wrong, their initial thought is, I must get a round of applause. And that perhaps explains why Gillian Keegan made such a fool of herself yesterday. It's a funny old world, isn't it? And I don't want to do any more on that, although it's at the moment the biggest political story at the national level. I don't know enough, and I don't think there are enough issues to discuss the state of play in Birmingham. I don't know if you heard that in the news. Birmingham City Council has formally declared itself in financial distress, a Section 114 notice which will prevent all but essential spending to protect core services. It's largely because of a £760 million bill to settle retrospective equal pay claims. So the moral there is, if you're not paying your staff equally, start doing it now. Because if you don't, then when justice finally catches up with you, you might find yourself unable to meet the bills. But we'll probably speak to an expert on that at some point before 1 o'clock today. But I can't see it as a phone-in. What I do see as a phone-in, I've always seen this as a phone-in. I don't know. One day I might do a phone-in on why do I find this subject so fascinating. But I really do. I thought, and if you listen to the show on a regular basis, you will know this. I thought that by now, vegetarianism would have almost taken over. If I think back, I've been doing this job, you'll find this very hard to believe. I've been doing this job now for almost 20 years. And of all the things that I have wobbled on or changed my mind about, I think that vegetarianism is one of the biggest. What I love about it as a conversation for us to have together is that it runs the entire gamut of engagement and enthusiasm. You can go from people who are passionate about not eating animals to people who are either passionate about eating animals or passionate about hating people who don't think you should eat animals. There's this sort of weird palette of emotional extremity involved. But there's also room for ambivalence. That's the bit that often gets overlooked in these sort of conversations. There's people, I take it or leave it. Don't really, good for you. Yeah, but don't tell. What I thought would have happened by now, partly because of Simon Amstell's brilliant film, was that it had actually gathered pace. I don't know what all the numbers are, but we did a phone-in not long ago about people possibly stepping back from vegetarianism. The special fake meat products, for example, had gone into freefall, but that's going to have as much to do with the cost of living crisis as it is with conscience. But I read this morning that 650 academics have called on British universities to commit to 100% plant-based catering. And this is a consequence, of course, of the climate crisis, saying that the institutions have for centuries been shining lights of intellectual, moral and scientific progress. It's a student-led plant-based universities campaign, but it's 650 academics who've signed up for it. And they're likening meat-free food to the fossil fuel divestment, which 101 UK universities have already committed to. So that's the backdrop, all right? That's not, I don't think, the question that is going to concern us mostly. The question I've got for you is why And think about this, because it's not another one. I mean, we can have some fun. Someone rang me up once and called me a corpse-eating psychopath because I still eat meat, even though I know that on some level I shouldn't. And it's usually quite knockabout. It's also a terrible subject for all of the man-childs. So should you say man-children? See, the plural of man-child. You'd think man-childs, wouldn't you? Even though the plural of child is children. If I say man-children, it sounds wrong. Men-childs? Man-childs? Men-children? I don't know. So what is the plural of man-child? The British media is full of man-childs. I used to be one of them. In some ways, I probably still am. But very few subjects bring out the inner man-child of a broadcaster or a columnist than vegetarianism. And I think I've worked out why. I think, as with almost all weird behaviour, it's a combination of shame and guilt. So you kind of love animals in some sense, and therefore you realise there's a cognitive dissonance involved in eating them, i.e. you know that you shouldn't, but you're going to anyway. And while you do so, the person over there who isn't is, in your mind, morally superior to you. So you then have to attack them, often by accusing them of behaving as if they're morally superior to you. So there's always that question about how do you know if someone's a vegetarian? Because they blooming tell you. So that, and I used to have a big problem with that. I wanted to try and highlight that you were a hypocrite because you were a vegetarian. So I would be one of those idiots that goes, excuse me, but I think your belt is made of leather. Zing, zing, zing. And you realise retrospectively that all you highlighted there was your own sadness, really, your own sort of man-child tragedy. And obviously, if you take as the starting point the belief that eating other living things after they've died, ideally, isn't a good thing to be doing, then you have gradations of observance. So, people who are telling other people off all the time for what they eat are a pain in the butt, but are probably on the side of the angels. And then people who are fighting back against that are also a pain in the butt, and they're not on the side of the angels. But the question I have for you is very personal. We're supposed to be trying to reach net zero by 2040. Emissions from beef are a huge contributor to greenhouse gases, although they are diminishing all the time. And in 2023, gosh, I've just realised that this is a conversation that I literally want to have, because I've spent almost all of my working life having heated debates, as Mrs. Merton used to call them on the telly. My interest in this is seriously informed by the fact that we've had so many conversations about this over the years. And the question is exactly a consequence of that fact, that process. It's why is there not more of it? Why has vegetarianism, or why has the rejection of meat not gone further and faster? And everyone can answer that. I come at it from a position of thinking that it should have done. I eat considerably less meat than I used to, but I do not, and I do so partly for health reasons, but I cannot conceive at the moment of a day when I won't eat meat anymore. And I think 5 years ago, I thought I was going to knock it on the head. This is quite a personal analysis, but I wonder how many people listening, I wonder whether you're in a similar situation. I sort of was edging towards it, but I seem to have either stood still or gone into reverse. When you look at the sales of meat substitutes, of plant-based meat substitutes, you see a very distinct reverse, although, as we've mentioned, that may be as much to do with cost as it is to do with conscience. But I sense that there is a stalling or a reversing of what I previously identified as an inexorable drive towards more rejection of meat. First question, of course, is whether I'm right or wrong. 0345 6060973. The second question is why? Why is this happening? Has there been a successful fight back from the farming industry, for example, or is there something else going on? So you can come at it in one of two ways. You can either do what I've just done and describe a very, very personal relationship with meat and why you think this move towards, I don't want to keep saying vegetarianism, but I'm using it as a word that means not eating meat, the rejection of meat. Why you think you have slowed down on your path to eating no meat, or stopped, or gone into reverse. And then the broader social question of why society, because it did feel a few years ago, didn't it? It did feel a few years ago as if there was almost an inevitability. That brilliant Simon Amstel film that I always forget the name of, sort of posited a future universe in which not only did nobody eat meat anymore, but nobody would ever admit that they ever had done. It had become, so utterly verboten and unpleasant that no one would admit that they'd ever eat. And you can see how that worked. You'd turn to someone in 50 years in a vegetarian universe and you'd say, I used to love eating some nice cows over there. I used to love eating them. You go, what? Imagine if you landed in a country, that wonderful Ricky Gervais film where no one's ever told a lie, The Invention of Lying. And he suddenly discovers that you can lie and he ends up ruling the world. Spoiler alert. I imagine if you woke up one morning in a world where no one had ever eaten meat, right? And everyone had enough food and everyone enjoyed their dinners, their dals and their vegetarian stroganoffs. I don't know. And you arrived in that world where nobody ate meat. And there were animals wandering around, like cows and sheeps, little lambs frolicking in the field. Don't phone me to say, actually, James, I think you'll find that if everyone was a vegetarian, we wouldn't do any farming anymore and all of these animals would be extinct. I know that all of that, but this is my fantasy, so I'll make the rules. So you arrive in this world, yeah, where everybody is a vegetarian. Some people are vegan, find the honey thing a bit weird, but no one ever eats meat. And you arrive there, and there's some lovely lambs frolicking in your friend's garden, and you say, oh, fantastic, we should have one of those for dinner tonight. How would they look at you? How would they think about you? So pigs, very clever animals. Some pigs over there, oh, lovely. Let's have one of those for dinner. And you've just arrived. Everything's gone quite well. You've said, hello, take me to your leader. And you're going brilliant and you're getting on very nicely. God, we've got so much in common. I can't believe you speak English. This is an amazing discovery. This is such a fantastic place. And what are we having for tea? Cheese. Oh, no, the vegans can't have cheese. We'll have a lovely vegetable stew with rice. Oh, that sounds nice. What are we having for breakfast? Muesli. Okay, I quite like muesli. There's some lambs over there. Why don't we have one of them for dinner? How would they look at you if you said that? So that's why I thought we were sort of heading in that direction. Did you hear my tummy growl then? Just to prove that I'm talking about bacon. So you're heading in that direction. I sense that we were heading towards a place where eventually vegetarianism was going to sort of seem like an inevitable destination. And now I think it's not. And I want you to tell me why. 0345 6060 973. For fans of traditional phone-ins, what do you think about 650 academics calling on British universities to commit to 100% plant-based catering? Not for reasons of conscience with regard to eating animals, but for climate-related reasons. Actually, that's not fair. That's quite an interesting question as well. But it's not as interesting as why, as a society, we seem to have slowed down or gone into reverse on that journey towards the inevitability of widespread vegetarianism. 18 minutes after 11 is the time. The number you need is, all together now, 0345 6060 973.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 20 minutes after 11 and you're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Sort of personal inquiry, really, about the unproliferation, just to invent a word, of vegetarianism. Comes as we learn of hundreds of academics calling on universities to take meat off menus. And I just sort of stopped reading that and realised that things are not moving anywhere near as quickly as I thought they would be doing by now. And that I predicted some time ago that everybody would be heading towards either a meat-free future or a future containing much, much less meat. And it hasn't transpired, at least not as far as I can tell. You may be seeing things entirely differently. Ethan is in Amesbury. Ethan, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello,
so, firstly, just on a personal level, because I kind of want to tackle both, just quickly. I, during lockdown 1, was barbecuing steaks and really into steaks because obviously we had all the time to barbecue. And then I met a girl who was a vegan. And one night I was watching an episode of Come Dine With Me and some bloke was making some meat platter. And
a meat platter?
Yeah, and for some reason, just like a light switch had gone off, and it was like that skin and flesh and muscle. And since then, and that was about 2 years ago, I haven't touched meat. It was just an instantaneous thing that happened.
Really?
I just saw
so
it.
watching someone else do it was a more visceral experience than doing it yourself.
I'd made the connection of that is skin, that is muscle, it's just mashed up bits of all of that stuff. And since that moment, and it was straight away, haven't touched meat since.
Gosh.
And I know that's not the case for everyone, but that's what I went through.
And why did you mention the girl? Because you think she may have given you new lenses through which you were looking when you saw the...
Yeah, I mean, to go kind of classist, she's from a completely different background to me. Her parents lived in Cornwall with lots of land and allotments and stuff, whereas I grew up in a working class household that couldn't do that. So I guess our dietary stuff, what we had access to was different. Yes. So she was more able to adjust to it, whereas I wasn't so much. And then just kind of on the broader level, I think this is something that can get lumped in with all the other denying of science. Yes. So vaccinations, COVID, fossil fuels.
Yes.
The meat industry has such an influence on how we view these products. We see salads as a boring, negative thing, whereas scientists, dietitians that research this stuff, their life is researching this, tell us unequivocally that to live a healthier, longer life, a plant-based diet is crucial to that. But the meat industry have managed, much like in other industries, with the fossil fuels and whatever, to convince us that that's not the case, that we shouldn't be believing those things.
But I mean, you're casting it as either or. I think most people, I could be wrong, I could be completely wrong about this, but most people surely enjoy, just because they enjoy meat doesn't mean they don't enjoy a salad.
No, I think there's an arrogance that I think gets levelled towards vegetarians, vegans from meat eaters, where there's this weird power dynamic.
Yeah, that's true.
I think that, like with the salads, people that eat salad, it's kind of looked down on. If you order a salad at a restaurant, people think a certain way about you as opposed to ordering a steak, and it's kind of backwards. Would
that have been the girl you were talking about's experience when she was growing up?
Yes.
It would as well, because I don't know that is... I ordered salad last night, only as my starter. It was a Thai salad. It was really, really delicious with a really punchy dressing. But I don't... Certainly it was probably true growing up. You just presumed someone was on a diet, didn't you, if they ordered a salad, and therefore not enjoying their food. So there's something in that. What about this? And it could be that my theory is complete bunkum, of course. It wouldn't be the first time, Ethan. What about my sense that 5 years ago I thought that this process was really moving fast and that there'd be loads more people than there are now being where you are, but your journey's been quite personal rather than societal.
Yeah. Oh, well, I think definitely, and this is shown with the student-led campaign.
Yes.
Like, I'm only 26, but I think people younger than me, I think there is going to be a big shift, kind of in my lifetime.
You still do.
Where I think you've got the older people. Anymore. You've got older people, maybe the Daily Mail readers, that are those ardent steaks and burgers, and a burger is made of beef and chicken.
Yeah.
As opposed to the younger generation that are understanding this stuff a bit better.
We need some breakdown, don't we? Yeah, that's a really good point. And that then becomes, I'm not sitting in moral judgment of you when you have a burger. I'm literally pointing out you are contributing a lot more than you need to the climate crisis, which, of course, young people have been educated about in a way that the Daily Mail readers you describe have simply, well, not just not been educated about it, they've been misinformed and continue to be misinformed. Thank you, Ethan. I think Phil's a bit of a pervert. Phil has texted in to say, go on, say big meat. No, Phil, you weirdo. I'm not going to say big meat. That would just be... But I know what you mean. You mean the meat industry, as it were, or the farming industry pushing back against the message that eating meat contributes to climate change. That was nice, Ethan. Thank you for managing to straddle both the personal and the political. 26 minutes after 11 is the time. Alison is in Bury St Edmunds. Alison, what would you like to say?
Oh, hi, James. Lovely to talk to you again.
Likewise.
I own and run a vegan cafe, and 60 to 70% of my customers are not vegan, I would say.
Okay.
And I don't think it's so much it hasn't skyrocketed the way you thought. I think it's more plateaued.
Yes.
And I agree with
I offered up plateaued. I said it might have stood still rather than actually gone backwards, but it's either slowed down or stopped.
Yeah, and I think at the beginning, because I opened, I've been here 5 years now, and prior to that I had a stall on the market. And it was at a time when there was nothing. You know, or if I went out to an event, all I could have was chips and black coffee. Yeah. So, you know, so I thought, right, I want to do something about it. And I did. I think what happened was everybody jumped on the bandwagon, the supermarkets, the companies, and the market got saturated. Yeah. So now they're kind of pulling back and going, oh, well, this doesn't sell as well and this doesn't sell as well. And I think that is what's happening, and it's kind of levelling out a bit, shall we say.
So they must have had focus groups looking at that and trend predictors and trend forecasters. So they got it wrong as well. So, you know, I had that very real sense of momentum is the word I've been looking for 28 minutes. And that sense of momentum, you agree, seems to have disappeared. But so you see this as a temporary plateau?
Yeah, I think it's sort of indicative of you know, the cost of living crisis. People don't, you know, want to go out and spend too much. But then again, some of the hospitality industry is doing really well. You know, I mean, here we're okay. We're not racing ahead, but we're holding our own. Good. And I think it's all about just showing people that they can have an alternative. I mean, you have to meet people where they are. So there's no point in shoving it down people's necks and saying, well, you've got to go plant-based because of this. You've got to go vegan because of this. We all have our own journey. And like you said before, you know, that you sort of said about vegetarians. There's vegetarians and then there's vegetarians. I say the same about vegans. You've got the vegans at one end who are quite okay, and you know, and then you've got staunch vegans right at the other. So I fit somewhere in the middle. Yeah. So, you know, and you have to, I think nowadays we don't so much eat because we're really hungry. We don't eat because we know it's healthier. We eat because of taste. You know, we know we shouldn't eat a pizza every night. We know we shouldn't have a Chinese Saturday and Sunday, you know, but we do it because we like the taste. And I think that is the same with meat. Okay, you know, a lot of people won't, you know, say, oh, I couldn't give up bacon sandwiches. Well, for me, and one of the reasons for me is because that animal's life is no more important than my taste buds. My taste buds are not important, you know. Do you see where I'm coming from?
Of course I do. That's a philosophical approach to something that's quite, I keep using the word visceral. I need to double check its meaning before I use it again. But you're using your brain instead of your buds.
And I didn't start that way. I started out for my health. You know, I had a slight tummy issue. I went dairy-free first, and that was my journey. So I relate to the chap who has just been speaking, how and we're all on our different journeys. And I often joke in here, and I say that, you know, people, because some people are not going in there, it's vegan. And I'm sure they think they're going to come over the door and they're going to turn vegan automatically. And going to
get hit over their head and by a, I don't know, a patchouli oil flavoured. What's the most popular thing on your menu?
Oh, my word. Well, we do a bit of everything. I would say at the minute it's probably the mushroom red onion linguine, or, I mean, I'm just doing the menu for our Sunday lunch on Sunday. Yeah. You know, we eat the same as everybody else. You know, we have roast potatoes, we have veg, we have naughty things, we have cakes. You know, we do. I mean, I make cinnamon buns on a Saturday and they fly out of here.
And so, what is the cafe called, Alison? I'm late for the news, but I can squeeze in a quick advert.
It's Alison's Eatery, and thank you very much.
Alison what?
Alison's Eatery.
Alison's Eatery. Yeah. It does exactly what it says on the tin. Good luck, Alison. It is 11:31. Holly Harris is here with your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
I am 34 minutes after 11. I'm looking at this Birmingham story. It's Lewis Goodall may talk to us about it a little later. He, like me, grew up in more in Birmingham than me. I was in Kidderminster, which is a few miles outside. You have that sense sometimes, don't you? So council's gone bust. In this case, it's a Labour-run council following Croydon and Thurrock. And the tipping point is a equal pay case. Council has been ordered to recompense women who were not paid the same as men in similar roles, and that's to the tune of about £740 million. Pretty much Rishi Sunak's personal fortune, actually, that, isn't it? When you combine it with his wife, that's quite interesting, isn't it? That you've got a prime minister who's got that much in his current account, and the largest council in Europe goes bust because it hasn't. Make of that what you will. I don't see how this conversation about cutting taxes works in the current climate. How can anybody look at schools or hospitals or councils going bankrupt and think what we need is to free up less cash for these institutions? I don't know why that's popped into my head, but it has. They're not getting enough money from central government to meet their statutory obligations, their statutory responsibilities. It's almost as if austerity is designed to drive the country into a dark place while a tiny number of people get richer and richer and richer, almost. 36 after 11. So you can tell I'm thinking about that. It's broken while we're live on air. Possibly we should get stuck into it together. But unless you can see a way into it, then I may confine myself just to some expert analysis. In the meantime, completely different conversation about a subject that you could either see as being infinitely more important than the state of Birmingham Council because it's about the future of our entire planet, or infinitely less important than the state of Birmingham Council because it's about vegetarianism. It's up to you, I suppose. I see it as being a little bit of both. And the reason why it's very important is because climate change and meat consumption are inextricably linked. So why has it slowed down? Why has this drive to... And so far, most people recognise this analysis. Why has it slowed down or indeed stalled? Alex is in Edinburgh. Alex, what do you think?
Morning, James. So I haven't eaten meat for 8 years now. And a sort of slowdown of the adoption of the meat-free diet. Like say, there's three things I've noticed.
Is that a smoke alarm in the background?
It's a bin lorry.
Is it?
Yeah.
I might just wait until it's gone and then come back to you if that's all right.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you, Alex. I don't know why. I just sort of felt a bit... Did you feel that? Was it getting on? Have I been rude? I haven't been rude to Alex. I was very polite, but it was quite... Anyway, it was interfering with my concentration level. Sarah's in Tunbridge. Sarah, what would you like to say?
Oh, hi.
Hello.
Yes.
Hello.
As a animal eater, obviously, you may well think it's all slowed down. But
yes.
As a vegan of 41 years...
Yes, but you just heard the woman running a vegan cafe in Bury St Edmunds who agreed with me.
Yes, she may well have agreed with you, because more and more
but she's not a meat
places are opening that are selling vegan food, so there's more options now.
Okay.
And so it goes on, and it's the same with... All I can say is...
Yes.
I believe it's going up all the time. I remember when I was called a vegan.
Yes.
What is a vegan, people would say, apart from correcting them on how we pronounce it.
I think over the last 41 years it has definitely gone up, but I'm thinking more about the last 5 or 6.
I know what you're thinking, and I would disagree with you.
But no one called you a vegan 5 years ago, did they?
No, but I believe... Over time, when I go into a supermarket now, there's far, far more choice of vegan stuff, and it's under the vegan banner. Mm. And I believe, as the big boys get in, often, unfortunately, the meat producers, but they get into the vegan side as well, because they have more power. Capitalism causes the smaller guys who started out to fall off the wagon. Yes. And I genuinely believe that you can go now basically to any, except a steakhouse perhaps, but any restaurant, and you can get a vegan option. Nobody says what is a vegan. No,
I think we're at slightly cross purposes, Sarah, which is my fault, I'm sure. The last time we discussed this a few months ago, it was actually because the vegan options in supermarkets were decreasing. They'd sort of peaked and then they were coming back down again, partly because a lot of the products were very heavily processed and people were therefore rejecting them, and partly because of cost and the discovery that you can have a delicious vegan meal without having to buy any specifically vegan products from a manufacturer. So the question of choice is pertinent, but I think it's got a lot to do with timescales. So it's come down in the last 24 months, for example, the range available in the average supermarket, it hasn't gone up.
No, it hasn't. It's gone up.
Well,
I'm
just reporting.
Choice.
Okay, well, I
you
can't.
don't buy the stuff I do.
No, but I do actually. I've got two. I've got a
now.
vegan and a vegetarian at home, and so I do buy the stuff. So and I'm not reporting on anecdotal data. My stuff about the decline is anecdotal, but the stuff about the range in supermarkets coming down that's fact. That's just counting.
Well, maybe your fact, but in my
fact, it's the facts that the supermarkets have. Yes, the supermarkets released the data, Sarah.
I don't care. The fact is there is more choice.
Yes.
Wherever you go.
So here's a supermarket saying we've reduced our choice, and here's Sarah saying no, you haven't. You've actually introduced more. You just don't realise it.
You're spoilt for choice for which milk you get.
Yes.
There used to be just the soya, and there might have been rice or something.
That hasn't been
12
reduced.
Different choices.
Yes, that hasn't been reduced in the last couple of years. But the choice of, for example, vegetarian sausages has. The choice of vegan ready meals has been reduced. The supermarkets told me. I mean, I don't care whether it's true or not. I'm just telling you the facts.
Well, the vegan sausages will have probably gone up as the vegetarian sausages have gone down because more people know how ghastly the dairy industry is. Okay. And people have absolutely no idea, and I include vegans in this, of how many animals we actually slaughter every month in this country. I write down the figures every month. I go into DEFRA and I look at their slaughter figures.
Yes.
I mean, how many chickens do you think, broiler chickens, that's the ones, you roast and what have you.
Yeah.
How many do you think we slaughter in this country every month?
Every month?
Yeah.
4 million.
Just have a sort of wild guess.
12 million.
100. This is July's figures, the latest. 100,900,000. That's just broiler chickens. That's not boiling fowl.
So 12 million chickens a month?
No, a month. 100 million.
100 million chickens a month?
And, nearly 101 million
so
for July.
2 chickens each for most of the adult population?
I don't know.
Well, I'm thinking...
Because I don't know if your average 6-week-old baby's eating chicken.
That's why I said adult.
Well, I don't know the maths of that. So is that good or bad? You mentioned 12 million.
For the people who... Well, I just said a number, to be honest. I wasn't really thinking about it
too deeply. I know,
because
nobody does think about
but I'm not
the
shocked. I'm not shocked by the figure. I think 2 chickens a month for the average adult is perfect. I mean, that seems quite... You can get half a chicken for your Sunday lunch in most pubs.
Oh, well, then
so that's 4 Sunday lunches.
900,000.
That's 4 Sunday lunches.
Slaughter.
That's 4 Sunday lunches per adult. So when you think about it like that, it's not really that shocking. I thought it might be higher.
Oh, gosh, no, it's dead. For the chickens, it's shrug shoulder time.
Well, no one's shrugging their shoulder. You were expecting me to be shocked by the number, and I'm paying you the compliment of thinking about it rather than just believing the opposite. Because if I was adopting your attitude to this conversation, I would now say, sorry, I don't believe you.
Well, you mean you don't believe the DEFRA figures?
No, I don't believe you at all.
Okay. Well, I'll give
just
you
like you didn't believe the supermarket figures 3 minutes ago. So I'm just copying you now. So I don't believe you. I don't care what the figures say. In my experience, there's hardly any chickens being eaten at all these days.
Okay. Very few chickens. Yes. Okay, sheep is 1,042,000 a month.
66.8 million people. So if we divide that, what do we reckon?
No, you can't keep adding these babies in there.
I'm not. I'm trying to remove the babies. So if it's 66.8 million humans at the moment, what should we say? Should we say 50 million just to get rid of because you start eating quite young. So 55 million?
Well, a lot of us are vegan and vegetarian.
That's true. Well, not that many. I think it's going down.
Oh, it's going down, is it? Right. Well, pigs were slaughtered in July, which was a figure quite down, 23%, was 811 million. Thousand. I beg your pardon.
You listen, Sarah, I've had some fun, possibly at your expense, and vice versa. But can I cautiously suggest, very cautiously suggest, that it's probably not... I mean, by all means, keep an eye on the numbers. But I imagine you find it quite traumatising and upsetting to check on these figures every month. Maybe just check once a year.
Why?
Well, because I think it.
Do you know who it traumatises? It traumatises people who eat animals because they have no concept of how many are eaten.
I don't think it does. I could be wrong, and we will find out shortly.
Okay, can I just give you one last thing?
Okay. Are you trying to traumatise me?
There's a tongue-in-cheek Facebook page called Elwood Organic Dog Meat.
Right.
And they show you their free-range dogs, and they show you the lovely little kennels.
What's a free-range dog?
And they show.
Oh, I see that. So it's as if we ate dogs.
And do you know the calls they get from animal eaters?
Yes.
Are so obscene about how evil they are for selling dog meat.
Yes.
And you just think cognitive dissonance really is so rife.
Isn't it? You mean when you're presented with evidence of something and you insist that it's not true?
What am I saying is not true?
The bit about the vegan sausages being reduced in the supermarket.
No, you said vegetarian.
Well, just the product, the vegan/vegetarian offerings being reduced in supermarkets.
Well, all I see is more and more.
I know, that's cognitive dissonance.
Okay. You just didn't like when you said 12 million chickens.
Okay,
when
200.
Actually, 101 million.
No, you got me there, Sarah.
You know, and
I know.
Well, I'm glad one of your daughters is a vegan.
So I didn't say it was my daughter.
Oh, I said two of your people. Oh, I thought your two children were one.
Don't give away that kind of information. None of your beeswax.
Oh.
Are you allowed beeswax?
Of course not.
Oh, that's a shame.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
11:49 is the time. Let's find out if the bin lorry's gone. Alex is in Edinburgh. Alex, are we safe?
We're safe. The bin lorry's gone now.
Carry on. Where were we?
So I've not eaten meat for 8 years, but regarding this slowdown, which I think definitely has happened.
How dare you suggest that? I have at least one person who is adamant that nothing of the sort has happened at all. Carry on.
So I think there are three reasons that can be attributed to this. The first one is the power of meat lobby, specifically beef lobby, and the huge amount of subsidies they get.
Unfortunately, we have to call it big meat because someone's already taken Big Pharma.
Okay, big meat.
Yeah.
For example, recently on Twitter, the Irish equivalent of DEFRA put out a post saying "eat less meat."
Yes,
and that was pulled down a day later, even though it's indisputable fact.
Right.
It was pulled down just because of the sheer pressure from
the lobbies.
In Ireland.
Big meat.
Even in Ireland, you've now got a whole sort of backwater political party being set up for agricultural farmers. That sort of leads into my second observation that increasingly it's becoming a culture wars thing.
Is it really? I mean, I thought it always was. It was probably the first culture war, actually, in some ways. And I speak as a warrior who was on the stupid side.
I think there's been a change just because in the past there wasn't this government incentive to try and discourage people. I mean, for example, on Twitter I follow a lot of environmental accounts, and you get all of these sort of Trump-supporting meat eaters joining in, going, "Oh, it's all conspiracy theory."
I just got one. Listen to this. Wow, you've really been given your script, haven't you? Are you going to tell us to next eat insects instead of cows? That's what you're talking about.
Yeah, exactly.
Someone who thinks that I'm part of some... I don't know what I'm part of. Some sort of... Is this when I get another check off George Soros, is it? I don't know. It's so hard to keep up with it. But that's both culture war and conspiracy theory.
Absolutely. And I think there's been a big rise in this over the last sort of 18 months. I mean, you've always had people sort of mocked vegetarians.
Yes,
but
you've really noted it. And that's on socials more than in real life. Presumably.
Absolutely.
That's really interesting. Where does it come from? Do we know? Is it just searching around for things to divide us with again? Or is there a fear from... Because, you know, these massive meat-producing companies in America and the UK and Ireland, they've got vested interest to protect. So are they now fearful? Have they been pushed into pushing back by the march of vegetarianism, or is it more cynical than that?
I think it's also politicians from Farage's ilk who go to rural communities where the meat industry is a big thing, and then they play on this that liberal governments
So
are
you
coming.
can't blame
for
it
your
on
livelihood.
foreigners anymore, so you're going to blame it on vegetarians.
Exactly.
And the third one, sorry, I've distracted you. I bet you can't remember now.
The third one, which is something I struggle with, and that's the consciousness that heavily processed food is bad for us.
Yes.
There's a big leap between vegetarianism and veganism.
Yes.
And to an extent, I'd say veganism is quite unhealthy, because when you look at many of the
Don't let Sarah hear you. Do not let Sarah hear you say that.
It's very, very hard to replace in processed products egg, milk, dairy with vegan equivalent. A lot of the time it's oils and things that just we know aren't good for us.
So this was my lesson last time we touched on this subject, was how processed some vegan products are as opposed to vegan food. So vegan food could be an apple, couldn't it? But vegan products.
Absolutely. I mean, I sometimes eat vegan products, but when I do, I am aware it's junk food.
God.
And I think vegan products are the equivalent of meat junk products, like a McDonald's burger is a junk product. The vegan equivalent is also a junk product. So it's an occasional, it's not daily food that you can be eating all of the time.
That's really interesting. Do you remember Morgan Spurlock's film? We're probably too young.
I don't.
So he did a film about, I forget what it was called, but he just ate every day. He ate junk food, and it was called Supersize Me, because every time somebody said to him, "Would you like to supersize that, sir?" he had to, by the rules of the film, say, "Yes, please." And then he had doctors tracking his physical progress. It would be fascinating to see that done, the vegan version, wouldn't it?
I imagine the results would be the same.
I'd be surprised, but possibly you're a bit more informed on this subject than I am. But in a way, it would be like perfect 20-year anniversary. It would be just as shocking if the vegan products had a deleterious effect on health comparable to what the... Because it's all the other stuff you're eating as well, isn't it? As you say, it's all the oils in the bread and the sugar, and that's a really helpful contribution, Alex. Thank you. There's three quite different things which can all be happening at the same time, all contributing to this sense of retreat, actually, or a diminishment of momentum. That's a good phrase. A slowing down. That's me all over, isn't it? I said the diminishment of momentum. What does that mean, James? Slowing down. Why didn't you just say slowing down, you great big pompous yeah, all right. Kath in Nottingham, last word. Maybe not quite the last word. We'll soon find out, Kath. What would you like to say?
Well, first I'd like to say I'm an active member of Nottingham Green Party.
Hey.
And thank you. And I wanted to say that I think there are two main reasons why vegetarianism has stalled and isn't expanding. And one is that it is more difficult to cook vegetarian food and massively much more difficult to cook interesting, flavoursome vegan food. But even vegetarian food, meat gives you a kind of very easy flavour and interesting centre to the meal. So if you're in a hurry, it's so easy just to stick on a couple of veg. You don't have to flavour the veg, just put some meat on the grill. Whereas, and with vegetarianism, you rely heavily on cheese to give flavour, and you can't eat cheese every single day. So you end up having to use spices and nuts and a lot more effort to make a flavoursome meal.
I think that's true, actually. I think that's true.
So that I think that's one thing that makes a lot of people not get round to it. But the other thing I wanted to say is that I think human beings tend to put off facing up to things until they have to, and that is what is generally happening with climate change. And we're also very influenced by what other people are doing. So you look around, you see everyone else is eating meat, everyone else is driving around in their petrol cars, everyone else is flying or doing all these things that we should be changing. And therefore, what difference does it make if I change? And people have nice lives. Not everybody, but a lot of people have nice lives. They don't want to change them.
Yes, if you don't have a nice life, you're probably even less likely to change it, because it's one of the few, quotes, pleasures, end quotes, that you currently enjoy. I remember a politician came out and said you can't expect poor people to give up smoking. It's one of the only pleasures they have in their life.
Absolutely, no.
It's a similar principle. And I suppose then the challenge is to not make it feel like a sacrifice, isn't it?
Well, it is partly changing the culture and emphasising the health benefits, which people are aware of. But, of course, a lot of people just go on eating unhealthy diets. And making it more of a norm. So I think the idea of the lecturers who are asking for the changes in the universities is great, because then a lot of people just go to eat their meal in the cafeteria when they're in a rush, and all the options are vegetarian. So you just get used to eating vegetarian food.
So the question becomes, are you hungry? Yes. All right, I'll have one of them then, as opposed to, are you contributing to climate change? I'm just hungry. All right, have this. It'll be fine.
And you've got 20 minutes, and therefore you just eat, take.
And you highlight there the big difference between vegan and vegetarian, because I would have no problem really with a vegetarian menu if I needed to eat something, if I wandered into Pret a Manger or wherever it was. But vegan would be a slightly different proposition. If I'm having a mayonnaise or butter or something like that. So they're just trying to get rid of meat, and that's the climate change argument. Whereas veganism is different, isn't it? It's a different proposition. That's the sentient being should make no contribution to my life.
They're two separate issues.
They really are two
separate. Cruelty and the climate change.
What's the Green Party's position on this officially? I mean, does it? I mean, it's not going to enforce anything, but what might it introduce?
No.
The
Green Party doesn't have an official position that eating meat is wrong. But at all our meetings and conferences and so on, everything is always vegetarian. And we would certainly say most of your meals should be vegetarian. But I think that there is a debate within agriculture about whether you should stop farming and eating animals altogether. And George Monbiot is on that side of the debate.
Yes,
but then you've got other agriculturalists like Alan Savory and Chris Smaggy, who say that animals are a natural part of keeping the landscapes green and verdant.
So then it becomes about being humane and being responsible.
You just have a few. You have a lot of people would say that in a mixed cropping, rotational farming system, organic farming system, you need animals to put fertility back in the soil. Therefore, there should be a few animals around. Therefore, you might as well eat them when they come to the end of their life. So it's not conclusive at all.
No, I think that's such a helpful contribution, Kath, and it's a mark actually of how the momentum may have diminished in the drive towards more widespread vegetarianism, but the conversation among adults has actually improved enormously, with a lot more live and let live, if you pardon the pun, than there was before, and not a single stupid comment about whether or not you're wearing leather shoes. It's 12 noon.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 4 minutes after 12. I hate it when this happens. It always happens if a story breaks while we're live on air, and I sense that it is really important, but I can't turn it into a phone-in. You don't mind me, do you? Coming to you with these little problems on a daily basis, sharing my grievances with you, my little issues. Birmingham City Council has formally declared itself in financial distress. Largest local authority in Europe, Labour-run. Hit by a £760 million bill to settle equal pay claims, which means it can't really meet its statutory responsibilities. And given the experiences that the Labour Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, had when he needed help from central government to get through lockdowns, or, of course, to mitigate the impacts of ULEZ, I don't think that Labour City Council should be holding their breath expecting help from the government, despite the fact that, of course, regardless of how you vote, you pay tax. But if you want to prove me wrong, so here you go. I haven't got a topic. I haven't got a question. I bet Sheila turns up at 1 o'clock with a zinger of a question, and I'll just sit there thinking, God dear, you've blown it again, O'Brien. But if there is something, imagine I've asked you a really good question. So John in Oxford texts me to say, what about Birmingham Council? Well, there you go, John. What about Birmingham Council? You ring me and tell me something interesting about this, because I can't for the life of me think of anything interesting to ask you. Go on, mate. Let's sit there texting. What about Birmingham Council? Phone me up. Say something interesting. I've got nothing interesting to say about Birmingham City Council. All right? If you do, 0345 6060 973 is enough. Well, shall I just sit and wait? I might just, I don't know why I'm getting cross. I'm not cross with you. I'm cross with John in Oxford. What about Birmingham Council? What about Birmingham Council, John? What do you want me to say? It's declared itself in financial distress. It's issued a Section 114 notice preventing all but essential spending to protect core services. It's too early to ask people in Birmingham what this means on the ground, I think. Well, there's a topic. Is it too early to ask people in Birmingham what this means on the ground? 0345 6060 973. What about Birmingham Council? 0345 6060 973. Thurrock was much worse. Thurrock had been sort of gambling with money. I don't know if you're aware of this. I shouldn't have said gambling. That's the Kidderminster accent that comes out occasionally. Gambling. It's lambs gamble, don't they? Lambs go gambling. Thurrock Council was gambling. They might have been gambling as well, but they were. I doubt it because most of their gambles lost. Thurrock Council recklessly gambled hundreds of millions of pounds on risky commercial investments while covering up evidence of its losses and attempting to silence critics. Which, of course, won't stop the Tories trying to claim that this story about Birmingham not being able to settle an equal pay claim is proof of the Labour Party's mismanagement. I'm 99% certain no one will ring me now, all right? So I've got quite a nice little question to ask you about something completely different. But if you've got something interesting to say about Birmingham City Council declaring itself in financial distress, then the number you need is 0345 6060 973. Right, so let's see. You know, my friend Ian Lee, when he worked here, used to put people straight to air sometimes without having any producers or assistant producers check on what they were going to say when they came on air. He's a genius, a radio genius, but he was playing with fire. He used to sit there listening to the radio in a sense of almost like jeopardy, wasn't it? You're and you're only listening. You weren't even in the studio or working as managing editor or program controller or something like that. You were just listening to it and you'd be there, oh my God, what's going to say? What's going to say? Is this call going to work? No pressure. Not going to work. Nothing to do with Birmingham. Someone wants to talk to me about Stirling Council. That's why this is not a topic, you see. I could spend half an hour proving it to you, but it'll be a very odd way to run a radio show. It's a bit late now. I've probably not left enough time to introduce a new topic to get calls after 12:15. We've got Sadiq Khan, I think, joining us at 12:30 to talk about free school meals, and then Lewis Goodall will hopefully run us through the situation regarding Birmingham City Council. There you go, John in Oxford. Birmingham City Council. It is 8 minutes after 12. 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need if you want to talk to me about Birmingham City Council. But, of course, I don't think you will. I don't think there's anything interesting to say about Birmingham City Council, despite the fact that it's just declared itself in financial distress. I am here, as ever, to be proved wrong, OK? That is always the purpose of the programme, in some way, shape or form, but on a day like today, it's a particularly pertinent issue. What I want to talk to you about instead is a collapse in support for the royal family among young people. And the more I look at it, the more intriguing I find it. 3 in 10 young people think that the royal family is good for Britain. This is a new YouGov poll. A majority of those aged 18 to 24 also held a negative opinion of the king as he approaches the first anniversary of his reign. Now, one of the great what's the word I'm looking for? One of the great achievements of this programme is its demographics, the age group and the socio-economic groups. Advertisers care about that sort of thing. We defy almost all of the traditional tropes of radio phone-ins. You can probably tell from the content. It's why you don't tune in every day to hear me banging on about ULEZ and immigration. So we have much younger listeners than radio phone-ins ordinarily accumulate. But I'm tempted today to ignore the 18 to 24-year-olds currently listening to this, because I can kind of work out why you don't have a very high opinion of the royal family, or why you don't have a very positive opinion of the king. I'm more interested really in how you would persuade somebody half your age that they're wrong. How would you persuade somebody half your age that they should have a more positive opinion of, let's just say, King Charles off the top of our head, all right? So 18 to 24-year-olds, this is really, really bad news for the monarchy, by the way, because slowly but surely these people will get older, and it's highly unlikely that the younger generation coming up behind them is going to be fomenting more positive images or more positive opinions about the royal family. Things that younger Britons have apparently cited when talking about whether or not to keep the monarchy include Andrew's friendship with the convicted paedophile Jeffrey Epstein and Harry and Meghan leaving the firm, as it's called, which led to plummeting support for the firm. Not that you would know that from reading anything in British newspapers. What would you say? I mean, I don't know if you have these arguments in your own house or in your own family, but what would you say to somebody? What would you say to a young person who said to you, I don't like the royal family? How would you explain to them? And it has to be specific to a young person in Britain in 2023, okay? It can't be just the usual arguments that you would ring in to tell me at any point we had, specific to 18 to 24-year-olds in the UK in 2023. I've got nothing. And I'm not particularly Republican. I'm not particularly opposed to the royal family. I'm very much Team Harry and Meghan, but that's a conversation we've had on many occasions on different days. And I think the newspapers are doing more harm to the royal family among younger people than they realise. I think that constant demonisation and attacks upon Harry and Meghan make young people just feel protective and imagine what it would be like to be on the receiving end of the sort of abuse that Jeremy Clarkson and others have doled out with relative impunity. You see someone being bullied, then in many ways, I think if you're young, you're even more likely to feel warm and protective towards that person. But what would you say to a young person who has a negative opinion of either the royal family or the king or both? How would you persuade them that they are wrong? Okay, 0345 6060 973. Just bear with me a moment. Have we had any calls about Birmingham? Are we getting? Should I speak to someone about Birmingham and see if it's an interesting phone-in subject, or should we just crack on and wait for calls about? Right, pressure's on. Cynthia's in Birmingham. Cynthia, what would you like to say?
I do think the Birmingham City Council story is absolutely huge.
Yes, I agree.
This has actually been going on for 11 years. 11 years ago, Birmingham lost a High Court appeal to say that they had to pay this £750 million. So they've known this problem for 11 years.
That's not quite fair. It's already paid out £1.1 billion.
Well, yeah, that's because they then didn't stick to the rules they set the first time round.
Right.
So what happened was people like refuse collectors started to get bonuses and overtimes and things again. School cooks didn't again.
Are you a school cook?
Recreated.
Are you
No, I'm not a school cook, actually, no.
Okay.
I would be a terrible cook, I'm afraid. But
just pause for a minute. This is going quite well. I'm quite interested in what you're saying. So other people listening who want to challenge Cynthia's analysis of the Birmingham bankruptcy, 0345 6060 973. We might not have to talk about the royal family at all. Carry on, Cynthia.
Okay, so they kind of sorted it out once, and then they went immediately back to the same behaviour that had caused the problem in the first place.
Are you sure about that? Because the bill, just on the bill as it stands, goes up by £14 million a month. This will partly be linked to interest rates rather than...
But it's interest rates because they loan the money.
But the interest rates were very low for a long time. What's your beef with refuse collectors getting bonuses?
Oh, it's not. It's the fact that the law didn't allow it. So the law said you've got to assess jobs, and if you need the same level of skill for a job, you've got to get paid the same amount of money. So the fact that many cooks are women and many refuse collectors are men, they needed the same level of skill, so they should be paid.
No, I know that was the equal pay case, but you said the current problems have been caused by them giving bonuses, by going back to giving bonuses.
Yeah, they have, because they wanted to keep. They've had tremendous problems, so that by the back door they've gone back to paying refuse collectors more through all sorts.
How have they done that by the back door?
Because they've upped their rates of pay, and they've done. You
confuse me now, Cynthia.
Right, I didn't want to do that.
No, well, it was probably inevitable. So why is nobody reporting this? Why am I only hearing this from you?
I think actually because because it's a bit complicated. B, because
well, how do you know it?
Because I happen to do it in another area, and
what?
Every council faces this. Okay. Every single council in the country faces same problem. that male predominantly jobs like refuse collectors were paid more than...
No, I know that. That's the equal pay bit. I don't understand why. Because they're saying they've got a £100 million botched IT project. They've paid 1.1 billion already, and the bill at 760 million outstanding is more than they get to spend on everything in a year, and that's going up by 14 million a month. What is this business about paying backdoor payments to refuse collectors got to do with the price of tea?
Because it means that now those women have got a claim. They've got another claim.
But there hasn't been another claim.
There has been another claim.
When was that?
They actually now owe them.
It's not a topic, is it? It's not. Well, hang on. Unless you can tell me when the other claim was.
Right, I don't have that detail with me. I don't. But what I will say to you is Birmingham. Yep. Two things. Birmingham have completely messed it up.
How?
Because they had tremendous refuse strikes and there was all sorts of rubbish all over the place. So that's point number one. And
well, hang on. Why are they getting bonuses if they're on strike?
Well, that was how they stopped the strike.
So they gave them a pay rise?
Yeah, in effect.
And then you think that all the dinner ladies complained and that's what's caused the current problem?
Well,
but we've got no basis or evidence for that.
There is basis. There is basis of evidence.
Where is it?
Okay, I've pulled over. I don't have it in front of me, but
now you're making me feel bad, like I'm badgering the witness or something. But even the leader of the Tories on Birmingham Council isn't aware of this refuse collector bonus argument. He's simply saying that they'd failed to show the proper speed and urgency needed to tackle equal pay.
Well, Birmingham. Well, okay. So if you want to do that. Birmingham actually were in the control of the Conservatives at the start of this problem. So that's the first point. But
what is?
But the second thing is, and the really worrying thing is, the fact that they say we will only deal with the most vulnerable.
Right.
If you look at what essential services local authorities have to provide, they are negligible.
Yeah.
They are genuinely very negligible. You could have, sadly, an old person sitting in their own.
Well, this is an important conversation. This is more important than non-existent bonuses for refuse collectors.
Well, I'm not sure it's non-existent.
Well, I think we're going to disagree. We're going to agree to disagree about that. What do you think it's going to mean then in that context? This non-essential services.
It's extremely difficult to know what they're going to do, but I have personally, as has other colleagues who've had similar jobs to mine in similar areas, gone and looked at what the law says as a basic minimum you have to do.
Yes.
So an example I can give you is there was a child who lived with a single parent. The single parent was within 6 weeks of death due to cancer.
Oh.
There was no social care support because until that child didn't reach the threshold for support until the mother was within 3 weeks of death. So it's all very well to say vulnerable people will be looked after.
But what do they mean?
But a 6-year-old whose mother's going to die in 3 weeks didn't qualify for help.
That's unbelievable. And that, so even under the even under the previous status quo, they didn't qualify. So.
Because there wasn't money, and the problem is, if you actually look at what the law says, you have to provide to the most vulnerable. You have the council has the right to define who the most vulnerable people are, and they may not. They may be literally the people who are within 24, 48 hours of death.
Thank you, Cynthia. I don't think there's anything in the refuse collector business, but if I'm wrong, I shall dress in sackcloth and ashes for the final segment of the programme when Lewis Goodall explains it to us further. Thank you. It's 20 minutes after 12. The number you need is 03. All right, let's try this. Okay, what's going on in Birmingham? What is going on in Birmingham? 0345 6060 973.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
23 minutes after 12 is the time. So here is how my inbox works, just so you know. You've got a £1.1 billion payout, £1 billion payout already over equal pay, an equal pay case brought against Birmingham City Council. They owe another 740 million, which is going up because of interest rates now at a rate of about £14 million a month. As a consequence of that, they can't meet their requirements. They can't meet their statutory obligations, their statutory responsibilities. And I'm getting a message off John in Oxford saying it's all about faith schools. You just, oh dear. I think I've already put you in Idiot's Corner. I wish, have I got a more stronger sanction than Idiot's Corner? It's a shame that. Anyway, we're trying to work out what's going on in Birmingham. It's not going well. Dan's in Birmingham. Dan, what's going on in Birmingham?
Hi, James.
Hello.
The issue is that the equal pay claim has never actually been resolved, even though they did settle back in 2014, 2015. They didn't actually put a stop to the equal pay issue because it's all about single status. They brought in a policy about single status, which basically meant that everybody at a particular grade could actually earn or should be eligible to earn exactly the same amount of money across the whole service. And single status was brought in, which the unions feared would mean that as a grade 1, grade 2 or grade 3, you could be forced to work anywhere within the council, because if you were that grade and there was a job opportunity at that grade, you should be able to do that job. Now, the big issue is, and has always been, male-dominated areas, such as the bin men, where they received additional bonus payments. And as a consequence, other people, grade 3s or grade 4s or grade 2s or grade 1s, weren't eligible for those additional bonus payments.
I think I'm being thick, Dan, because I know all this, but it doesn't explain the post-settlement scenario.
The post-settlement scenario came about because of independent lawyers.
What?
There have been other claims after they'd settled with the staff back in 2014, 2015. I don't recall the
It was 2012.
Okay, 2012. After they settled that, no win, no fee solicitors again approached them.
Right.
And they again settled with those no win, no fee solicitors.
Where is this coming from?
Where's what coming from?
This information, mate.
I actually work for Birmingham City Council.
Okay. So why is no one putting forward this explanation?
You would need to ask Birmingham City Council that.
But you work for Birmingham City Council. That's your qualification for contributing to the programme. You're trying to have your cake and eat it, mate.
Well,
you just zinged me. You just zinged me with I work for Birmingham City Council, so I'm sitting here thinking, well, he knows what he's talking about. So I ask you a question based upon the fact that you work for Birmingham City Council, and you say, well, you'd have to ask Birmingham City Council. That's not fair.
Well, what I'm actually trying to say is that I'm not at that kind of level where I can make those decisions. Those decisions were beyond my remit.
But none of the opposition politicians are making this argument or making this point. That's the bit I'm really confused about. It's you know, the.
Well, yeah, as a. Oh.
Who's that talking in the background now?
Oh, I've got the NHS blood transplant.
What?
As a we, James, we too are very bemused as to why this hasn't actually been settled. This was not it wasn't put a stop to.
Well, I'm now. This is no reflection on you or Cynthia. I'm more confused than I was when I started talking about it.
Because, in all honesty, James, the issue is that it was one of those situations where everybody thought it had been settled back in 2012.
Right.
We all acknowledged that, okay, it's all been settled. However...
That's why it's come back round again, this extra 760 million quid. But hear it now, because here's the following the implementation of a new IT system, analysis revealed the significant additional costs the council will need to pay. Given the huge sums involved, the council cannot afford to pay this from existing resources, including reserves.
I'm not absolutely sure. It's all down to the new IT system that was introduced.
Well,
this has come to a head because there was another tribunal hearing that happened around this time last year, I believe, and they ultimately settled in November.
Right.
Which then forced. Okay, I'll tell you what I know.
Go on.
The unions approached Birmingham City Council, possibly 18 to 24 months ago, and said, "Are there any outstanding equal pay claims?" Birmingham City Council told them no.
Right.
Even knowing that they were still going through a tribunal hearing with a firm of private solicitors.
Right.
Birmingham City Council then offered every member of staff a fixed set of fixed amount dependent on their grade.
To do a Gavin Williamson.
To basically turn around and say, here's some money. There's nothing to claim.
Shut up and go away.
Just shut up and go away.
Yeah.
Many members of staff took this.
But some did. Oh, this is just a nightmare, mate. It's not your fault.
It is a nightmare because... No, it is a nightmare because ultimately Birmingham City Council knew that they were still going through a tribunal hearing and basically lied. The unions
But no one's accusing them of that except you. The GMB aren't accusing them of that. The Tories aren't accusing them of that. The Greens aren't accusing them of that. And the local media isn't accusing them of that. The only people I'm accusing them of that is you.
Yeah, well, possibly because I don't know. All I can say.
I don't know either now. So Olivia just messaged me. So she said, "Stick with it, James. I reckon this is a scoop." And I think she's taking the mickey out of me.
Yeah, well, I can only tell you what I know, James. And
but you can't. You can tell me what you don't know, and you've told me more of what you don't know than what you do know.
Well,
but it's helpful. I think I might have a lie down during the headlines in a darkened room with some cucumbers on my eyes. So where does it end, Dan? Where does it all end?
Where does it all end?
Where does it all end?
That is a good question. Hopefully,
we got there in the end.
Hopefully Birmingham City Council will ultimately pay the amounts that their members of staff are due.
Well, I can't see what they've done wrong at the moment, apart from get hit with this massive equal pay claim that has ended up costing them even more than they were expecting. And then because presumably of interest rates, I don't know, it's gone north. And then this IT system that appears to have... The IT system revealed the significant... That's the weird bit of this story, isn't it? So we've got an excellent new IT system, lads. Let's have a little party glass of Prosecco for you. Let's cut a ribbon, some little party poppers. What's it called? Oracle. It's our wonderful new IT system. It's called Oracle. Let's turn it on. Let's have a look. Ooh. What? Oh. The new IT system says that we're £760 million in the red on that thing we thought we'd settled. As I understand this story, that is what has happened. And I probably still need someone to explain that to me. Amelia Cox is here now with your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 25 minutes to 1. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. People are being a bit rude to me. I'm going to read out one of my nice texts. James is absolutely on fire today. I've been in stitches all morning. What a great wit. You've been extremely amusing with some great callers. Bring back the vegan lady with the statistics again. And now you've got breaking news brought to you by the Birmingham Council employee. I reckon you should pass it to Amelia Cox to break to the nation. Other people are being a little less kind. David in Dartford says, you're supposed to be a news hound, James. Sniff out the story. And I've got no idea what's going on in Birmingham. Gillian Keegan's been very rude to me. For God's sake, she says, what is it you don't understand? They simply never adhered to the thing that got them into trouble in the first place. So more claims came in, compounding the position. Did you take a silly pill this morning, adds Jill. Luckily, she adds... said with love. The Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, is on the line. We will talk shortly about the free school meals initiative that you are rolling out across the capital at the moment. But I pick you up on a couple of issues of national news that you're obviously supremely qualified to talk about. Do you understand what's happened in Birmingham?
No, I don't. And I've got to confess two things. Well, two things. One is after that intro, you're reading out those text messages and tweets. I was thinking of hanging up.
That'd be a first.
But secondly, in my defence, I've been out and about at various schools and stuff, so I've not been following that news development in as much detail as I probably should.
And given that you are visiting schools at the moment, are you aware of which ones are facing closure or where children are going to be doing remote learning? Do you understand how this concrete story has reached the situation that it's reached in the last 72 hours?
I'm really angry about this, and I speak from my experience with Grenfell Tower and the consequences there. So in early August, we discovered that there were issues with public buildings with RAAC because the NAO published a report in June saying there are more than 500 schools affected. And what I said to the government is, look, we need to know not just what schools are affected, but what other buildings are affected: police stations, fire stations, housing, hospitals, halls of residence, etc. Radio silence from the government. From last week, we've been chasing the government saying, look, can you at least let us know the 156 schools that you're worried about? Which of those are in London? We're distressed parents, schools contacting us on Thursday, Friday. Do they need childcare plans? Are their kids going to be at home? Not tell that information. Let me tell you why I mentioned Grenfell, James, because we discovered after Grenfell that the cladding we thought was safe wasn't safe. And so a piece of work was undertaken to work out which other buildings not just had ACM cladding, but other forms of cladding. And we spent the last 5-6 years trying to make those other buildings safe, working with the government. The London Fire Brigade have done a very good job, but we've got no idea what the problem is with RAAC, what buildings are affected, how dangerous they are, what remedial action is required. And that's why, publishing a list of schools is the first step. So we can then work with the schools to make sure they're safe, reassure the parents, reassure the staff, and then let us know which other buildings may have RAAC so we can work to make sure they are safe. The longer the government delays publishing the list of schools, the longer they don't share the information of other buildings with us, I'm afraid the public are going to be nervous, concerned, and frightened.
How did the government find out which buildings are?
So so there's two things. One is the government say they've sent surveys out to the buildings they are concerned about. So actually they've got an idea. Think about a Venn diagram. They know the big circle of buildings that could be affected.
Yeah.
They've sent the surveys out to work out which of the schools may be affected. It becomes a smaller circle. Okay. And then they should be micro-targeting that smaller circle, but letting us know because we may be able to help. City Hall, councils, schools, it could be NHS Trust, whatever the building is, it could be a fire station. But what we don't want is, God forbid, a building collapsing when the people inside the building were ignorant that their building was unsafe.
Yes, I suppose that's the thing that everybody fears most in the current climate. Thank you for that, as I've clarified my understanding of some of the issues. 287,000 state primary school children across London as of this term, benefit from free school meals. Where did you find the money for this?
Well, firstly, I've had one of my best days as mayor today. I'm at Newport School in Waltham Forest, and I've had lunch with some sparky Year 5s and Year 6 children.
What did you have?
Well, there was today's a plant-based lunch today, so there was great great tomato pasta, great cheese pasty, great broccoli, lots of different coloured vegetables, great fruits for desserts, 4 types of melon. I didn't realise there were 4 types of melon until today. But it's my ignorance. But the point being is this, look, so in London, 110,000 children receive means-tested free school meals. To receive means-tested free school meals, your family income has to be below £7,400. So there are many children in London who are living in poverty, not eligible for a means-tested free school meal, but also are benefited from a free school meal. Yes, of course, it was a lifeline and gave breathing space to my parents. Yes, of course, I benefited from a nutritional meal, but I still remember the embarrassment and the shame queuing for my free school meal token, eating separately from my mates. And what I don't want is children to go through that. The good news is all the evidence suggests that a nutritional meal leads to better attendance, better attainment, better concentration, better productivity, better health benefits. Families benefit as well to the tune of £440 per child. So it's a win for the children, a win for the parents, a win for the school. And I'm hoping the government, after seeing the evidence in London, rolls this out across the country.
So it's primary schools, special schools and pupil referral units, I think.
Spot on. And so the 208,000 children figure you mentioned are the additional children that will receive a free school meal from yesterday.
So, I listen, I kind of don't understand. It's not a criticism, really, but we all know about, and we're just looking at Birmingham City Council and the public money being in very short supply as well as private money. But I can't quite see why, were my children still at primary school, they should be getting free meals.
Yeah, that's the same question I could ask. You could ask yourself in relation to the NHS, or in relation to next year when you're a pensioner receiving a free bus pass, or in relation to care. Look, we have a conversation about universal benefits. When you're an inpatient in hospital, nobody comes along and says, "Can you afford to buy your own lunch in hospital?"
So you're just putting it into the realms of basic universal provision.
Well, I'll make 2 points. One is, I've got money from business rates, £130 million, and I've got £5 million from my City Hall reserve. So I know I can afford to pay for this for at least a year. I know there's a cost of living crisis. My own experience tells me there's some of the stigma in relation to it not being universal.
That's gone, though, hasn't it? The stigma doesn't exist anymore.
In secondary school, that there's now cards and fingerprint technology, which means you wouldn't know as a secondary school pupil if the person next door to you is receiving free school meals or you aren't. In primary schools, it's a bit more complicated than that. But also, if the evidence suggests better attainment, better attendance, better productivity, better concentration, better health benefits, to me, it's a no-brainer.
Yes, I can see why. I can't let you go without asking about you, Les. How soon is it to take a judgment on whether it's going well or badly?
Oh no! Well, the good news is we're seeing, a week on, the fear people had. Listen, I understand the fear. Some of it was based on misinformation. Some of it was genuine. That everyone's going to be caught. I have to pay £12.50 a day, or get the bailiffs being sent in. Hasn't materialised because as I said to you, we knew that 9 out of 10 cars driving in out of London are already compliant. What I'd encourage your listeners to do is, if they're concerned, go to the TfL website, check if your car is compliant. If it is, you don't pay a penny, but you get the benefits of clean air. If you're not compliant, there's still £100 million left in the TfL coffers to support businesses, families and charities to make that transition.
When will we get an idea of how many people have been fined in the first?
So what happens is, in the first 14 days, between day 7 and day 14, is when TfL send out the enforcement notices. We'll have a better idea towards the end of this week or early next week about those who had a non-compliant car and didn't pay the charge. And what we saw in central London and inner London was, in fact, the enforcement notices sent out wasn't as big as people feared.
And how skewed could that figure be by the number of cameras that have been vandalised?
No, I'm not in any way downplaying people breaking the law and risking their personal safety.
What did you think about Ian Duncan Smith defending it?
Well, can you imagine if a Labour politician had said similar sort of stuff in relation to Just Stop Oil? Can you imagine if a Labour politician said something similar in relation to an Extinction Rebellion person breaking the law? And this is why these lot can never claim ever again to be the party of law and order. What's sauce for the goose is sauce for the gander.
But is it going to impact upon the provision?
No, not at all. I mean, no complacency from me, but I speak to the Commissioner from Transport every day. More than enough cameras, more than enough signage. But by breaking the law, what you're doing is potentially getting a criminal record, but also because it's connected to the mains, risking your personal safety.
Sadiq Khan, Mayor of London, thank you very much indeed, sharing details there of the 287,000 extra state primary school children across London now benefiting from free school meals. I liked that answer, I've got to be honest with you, because the question of why someone like me, why my children would get it, but the notion of a universal provision, something everybody gets is absolutely intrinsic to the NHS and many other areas of our community, our society, our country. 12:46 is the time. Going to have another crack, but with some expert insights at getting to the bottom of Birmingham City Council after this.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
12:49 is the time. I listen. I think an idiot's corner for Pat, actually. Pat's just texted to say, another boring London listeners only section. When will you give Andy Burnham equal airtime? In the meantime, I'm switching off. I just spent The best part of half an hour talking about Birmingham, Pat, you prune. How can that be a London-only exclusive listeners' sect? Literally talking about Birmingham City Council going bankrupt and, I will be honest with you, Pat, failing miserably to make either interesting radio or any inroads whatsoever into my understanding of the broader subject. So I will accept those criticisms, Pat, but I will not accept the criticisms that a conversation about Birmingham is exclusively about London. It's absolutely... I wish we'd never even gone there, to be honest with you. And Andy Burnham appears with Sheila regularly. So get over yourself. Probably not listening anyway, because he said he was going to switch off. Lewis Goodall is here to make sense of the Birmingham City Council story.
Are we going to make interesting radio here, James?
That's not the point
I don't want to.
Lewis, that's not the point.
I don't want to
anymore.
interrupt you. I mean, you're making pretty interesting radio in the last minute, and I'm not sure about your blood pressure, but who's got the defibrillator?
Where are we? Is this unexpected? Do we know exactly why it's happened? And is there any prospect of the situation being resolved in time to stop people worrying about the withdrawal of essential services?
Yeah. So first of all, we should say that this is not a local story for a very important reason. For two reasons. One, just taking it in and of itself, we're talking about 1 million people, which by any definition really is a national story. Yeah. It is also the biggest local authority in Europe with an enormous budget. What happens in Birmingham matters in and of itself, but also it is indicative of a much bigger story, which is that local government financing for years and years now has been teetering on the edge. A combination of all sorts of things. Austerity and the long-lasting effects of that, in real terms, either cuts or meagre increases over the past 10 years or so, plus the fact that during that time, the pressures on local government everywhere, not just in Birmingham, but everywhere have been going up and up and up and intensifying, whether that's around social care, for example, or children's services.
The ageing population.
Business
rates not raising as much as they used to.
Completely. So you've got all of that. And then there are particular circumstances around Birmingham, which is to say, it is a council that has long had problems in all sorts of different areas, particularly in its children's services. It is a big council, huge budget, as I say, quite unwieldy. And it has got, as a council, some of the most deprived areas in anywhere in the country that it has to deal with. And a particular kind of set of circumstances have come about. So there's all of that going on in the background, all the stuff about, macro stuff about pressures on budgets and increases in demand. But then there are particular things that have happened in Birmingham, which you can say perhaps is about how the money has been spent there in particular. So there has been a terrible IT programme, which has cost 5 times as much as everyone thought that it would. There have been other kind of projects which have gone wrong. And most of all, the council have had to deal with a long-standing equal pay settlement, which is said to going to cost the council anywhere between 700 million and north of £1 billion. So this relates to a Supreme Court decision which was taken in 2012, which, without getting into all the details of it, basically said that over many, many years, the council had not been treating women in its employ in the same way in terms of pay and bonuses as it had men. And so now it is facing this enormous cost, which it simply cannot pay. You put all of that together with all of the other components that I've talked about, and today the council has affected, the council leadership, the Labour-run council, has said, we can't pay our bills. And so they've issued this Section 114 notice, which effectively declares bankruptcy or says that it's insolvent.
Crikey. Just another bit I don't understand, and it's occurred to me several times in the last hour that it's possibly me that's being stupid here, but they've already paid £1.1 billion to settle those claims from the 2012, and they've discovered almost another 760 million. They claim partly because they've turned on this new computer system, and it's told them that there's another... Do you understand how that bit works?
And new claims are being made all the time, right? Because this goes back a very long way. And this is not just something that Birmingham is dealing with, by the way. Other councils potentially have to deal with it as well. But yeah, it represents a long-standing, structural, and potentially in some ways perpetual threat to the council's finances.
Yes.
And so now the question is going to have to be, this Section 114 notice has been issued, which basically means the council doesn't shut down, doesn't bankrupt in the sense that company goes bankrupt, that it stops trading. In a sense, I suppose the equivalent would be that it's kind of called in the receivers.
Okay.
A bit like Wilco has done,
yes.
Most recently of all.
Except they're not looking for a buyer.
Well, I don't know who would buy it. So they don't stop, if the schools don't shut down, the old people's homes don't shut down, all that sort of stuff. Statutory stuff that they have to do by law, they continue to do. But what effectively means is that any political decisions taken by the council stop. It no longer has discretion to do all of the other things that councils might decide to do, all of those other policy levers, until such time as it can basically come to an arrangement with central government to spell out and chart a way in which it will become solvent again, which will probably involve big increases in council tax for local residents,
Right.
cuts in services. And as I say, in and of itself, that matters because we're talking about 1 million people, one of the most deprived places in the country in parts. But also because, as I say, this isn't the first council to which this has happened. And we're going to hear a lot from, I think, Conservative Central Office over the next few weeks and months leading up to the election. You're going to hear that phrase a lot. Labour-run bankrupt Birmingham.
Right.
But the thing about that is that you can also turn around to that and say, well, what about Conservative-run bankrupt Northamptonshire?
Yes.
Because Northamptonshire County Council issued a Section 114 notice in similar circumstances because they became insolvent some time ago. Someone was talking to me, the local government secretary today, and they were saying, look, this isn't going to be the last. There are loads and loads of councils who are right on the edge of this. Because
And if they had an equal pay settlement, they'd be over the edge as well.
Yeah, one big unexpected pressure that comes their way, then that's it. They're done. And they're going to have to ask for a 114 notice.
So there will be no Winterval this year in Birmingham.
Well, I'm afraid the way things are going, probably the Lord Mayor's going to have to flog his sash, unfortunately.
What is on that list more substantively when you talk about levers and political decisions? What sort of stuff?
Well, it can be anything with relation to the education
So stuff like
estate.
Sadiq Khan's school meals today,
Completely.
all that's off the table.
Anything that a council might want to do that is in its discretion, whether it's around sort of local
Okay,
culture
yes.
or facilities or establishment, that all just goes
Libraries?
by the
Are there
by.
any statutory?
Libraries? There aren't. There are some statutory obligations with regards to it, but theoretically they could close them. Yeah, but this will be the long-term decisions
course.
that they have to make.
Have you still got family in Brum?
Yeah.
So how would you? I was there on Thursday of last week, actually. It's obviously not the city I grew up in, but it doesn't feel like a city in decline necessarily.
No, it doesn't. But of course, I mean, no, it doesn't. And there are lots of, in the city centre in particular, loads of regeneration over the last decade and a couple of decades. So no, in lots of ways, it is a city on the up. HS2 will be arriving at some point in the next decade or so. It's an amazing city. But it is true to say that it is, I think, Birmingham to some extent is a canary in the coal mine for what could happen in other places in local government. Yes, to some extent, this is about mismanagement, long-standing mismanagement. Yes, this is a case of a very large, unwieldy council, and there have been suggestions over many years about the prospect of breaking it up. It is the biggest local authority in Europe. Maybe it shouldn't be.
Yes.
But this is not a set of circumstances which is unique to that city by any stretch
So
of the
not too
imagination.
big to fail.
No, indeed not. Although in a sense it is. I mean,
Yes, I know.
Yeah,
As soon
yeah,
as
exactly.
I said that.
Yeah.
Because you can't let it fail like a
No.
company fails. So it's just a question of how long and how much.
Well, and there is the prospect, of course, of the Department for Local Government taking the city over, sending in, as they say, the commissioners, which happened in Liverpool a while ago. So Michael Gove could decide to effectively impose a form of direct rule from Whitehall on Birmingham.
And they've got a Tory mayor, of course.
The West Midlands overall does,
Yes.
the West Midlands Andy Street, but the city itself is Labour controlled.
Got it.
Has been for some years.
There you go. You see, it was capable to be both illuminating and engaging, as Lewis Goodall has just proved with consummate expertise. My apologies to everybody waiting to talk to me about that subject. I'm sure you'd have been more interesting than the people who already did, but we have unfortunately run out of time. If you missed any of today's show, you can of course catch up with it in the usual way on Global Player, where you can rewind live radio or enjoy the whole show podcast. You'll also find all of LBC's shows to catch up on, as well as the best video clips from LBC and other global stations. Rewind live radio on Global Player. Download it for free from your app store or head to globalplayer.com. Coming up at 4 on LBC, it's Tom Swarbrick, excuse me. But now it's time for Sheila Fogarty.
James O'Brien on LBC.